Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Jacob Thornfield, and I've been a ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest for 17 years. I've tracked black bears through January snowstorms, pulled lost hikers out of caves so tight you couldn't turn around, and shot 23 problem cougars without missing once. I know every cliff face and hidden hollow in these Kentucky mountains. I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. I was wrong. My grandfather used to tell stories about the wampus cat when I was a kid. He'd sit on the porch with his moonshine, eyes getting that faraway look, and talk about a six-legged panther that guarded the old Cherokee burial grounds. Said it was a woman once, cursed for spying on sacred ceremonies. I'd laugh and call him superstitious. After all, I was a modern ranger with training and equipment. I believed in science, not ghost stories. That was before October 1971, before 3 experienced hunters vanished from Clifty Wilderness like smoke in the wind. It started on a Tuesday morning. Cold had come early that year. Frost covered everything by dawn, making the sandstone cliffs shine like they were coated in sugar. I was drinking coffee at the ranger station when Deputy Earl Mackenzie called. Earl and I grew up together, hunted these same woods as boys. "Jake, we got a situation," Earl said. His voice had an edge I didn't like. 3 bow hunters didn't come home last night. Truck's still at the Gray's Arch trailhead. "Probably just camped out," I said. "It's peak rut season. They're probably tracking a big buck." "Their bows are in the truck, Jake. All of them." That made me put down my coffee. No hunter leaves his bow behind during deer season. Not unless something's very wrong. I grabbed my gear, Winchester rifle, rope, first aid kit, and headed out. The drive to Gray's Arch took 40 minutes on dirt roads that twisted through trees so thick they blocked, cut out the sky. When I got there, I found Earl standing by a beat-up Ford pickup, his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "What do we know?" I asked. "Registered to Mike Patterson. He and his 2 brothers came up Sunday to hunt. Wife expected them back yesterday evening." Earl kicked at the ground. "Here's the weird part. Their bows are here, but their arrows are gone." I looked in the truck bed. 3 compound bows lay there, expensive ones, but the quivers were empty. "Maybe they're doing some kind of target practice," I suggested. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. We followed the trail into the woods. The path was easy at first, well marked, popular with hikers. But after a quarter mile, we found where the hunters had gone off trail, heading down into the gorge where the big bucks hide during the day. That's when I started noticing things. The forest was too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In 17 years, I'd never heard these woods so silent. "You smell that?" Earl asked. I did. A heavy, musky odor like a wet dog, but stronger, mixed with something else. Something that reminded me of sulfur. We found their campsite in a small clearing near a rock overhang. The tent was still up, but it looked like it had been in a fight. Canvas ripped, sleeping bags pulled halfway out, a camp stove knocked over. But no blood, no bodies, no sign of where they'd gone. "Look at this," Earl said, crouching by a tree. "Claw marks. Deep ones, carved into the bark about 12 feet off the ground. 4 parallel lines, each one as wide as my finger." "What kind of animal makes marks that high?" Earl asked. I didn't answer. I was staring at the tracks near the tent. Paw prints, definitely from a cat. But they were huge, 6 inches across, bigger than any cougar I'd ever seen. And the spacing was wrong. The stride was too long, too wide. And there were 6 prints in each set, not 4. "Maybe it's a bear," Earl said. But he didn't sound convinced. I knelt down and measured the print with my hand. A cold feeling started growing in my stomach. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. 6 legs, boy. The Wampus cat walks on 6 legs. We need to follow these tracks, I said, standing up. We started walking. The prints led deeper into the gorge, toward the cliffs. The smell got stronger. The silence got heavier. My radio started crackling with static, even though we shouldn't have been in a dead zone yet. After 20 minutes, we found the first arrow. It was snapped in half and stuck in a tree trunk, 15 feet off the ground. The metal tip was bent like it had hit stone. How does an arrow get up there? Earl whispered. 10 feet farther, we found another one. Then another. All broken. All impossibly high. The tracks led us to the base of a cliff face. 200 feet of sheer sandstone, impossible to climb without gear. The paw prints went right up to the rock wall and stopped. Just stopped. Like whatever made them had walked straight through solid stone. Earl pulled out his handkerchief and wiped his face. I don't like this, Jake. Neither did I. But I was a ranger. I had a job to do. Let's check the top of the ridge, I said. Maybe they tried to climb up. We found a path that switchbacked up the cliff. It took us 40 minutes of hard hiking. My legs burned and my breath came in clouds. The temperature seemed to drop with every step, even though we were climbing higher. At the top, we found something that made my blood run cold. 3 hunting arrows arranged in a perfect triangle on a flat rock. In the center of the triangle, someone had drawn a symbol in what looked like dried blood, a 6-pointed star with a circle around it. That ain't natural, Earl said. No, it wasn't. I called Mary Sixkiller that evening. She was a Cherokee elder who lived in a cabin near the forest boundary. My grandfather had known her family, said she knew things about these mountains that no ranger manual could teach. She answered on the 3rd ring. Jacob Thornfield, I wondered when you'd call. How did you know it was me? 3 men went into the forest. The old guardian is awake. Of course you'd call. Her voice was calm, like she was discussing the weather. Come see me tomorrow. Bring tobacco. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those paw prints with 6 toes, the arrows arranged in a triangle, the claw marks 12 feet high. At dawn, I drove to Mary's cabin. She was waiting on the porch, a small woman with long silver hair and eyes that seemed to look right through me. Your grandfather told you the stories, she said. It wasn't a question. He told me a lot of stories. But you didn't believe him. She stood up. Come, I'll show you something. She led me into her cabin. The walls were covered with old photographs and maps. She pointed to one, a hand-drawn map of the forest from maybe 100 years ago. Areas were marked with Cherokee writing. These are burial grounds, she said, pointing to several spots. Sacred places where our ancestors rest. Your missing hunters went into this area. Her finger landed on a spot marked with a red circle. This is where the guardian walks. The Wampus cat, I said. That's what your people call her. We call her Utlunta, the one who watches. She was a woman once, curious about the sacred ceremonies reserved for men. She spied on them, broke the taboo. The medicine men gave her the face and body of a cat, 6 legs so she could never rest, and made her the eternal guardian of our dead. That's just a legend, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Mary looked at me with those sharp eyes. Is it? Then explain the tracks, explain the arrows, explain why 3 experienced hunters vanished without a trace. I couldn't. Something woke her up, Mary continued. Something disturbed the sacred ground. When that happens, she hunts. She protects what was taken from us. What do? You find out what disturbed the burial site, and you pray she lets you live long enough to fix it. I left Mary's cabin with more questions than answers, but I couldn't ignore what she'd said. I'd seen those tracks, measured them myself. That afternoon, I went back into the forest with Pete Dawson, another ranger from the adjacent district. Pete was younger than me, only 5 years on the job, but he was solid, good in a crisis. We hiked to the area where the hunters had vanished. The silence hit us the moment we entered the gorge. That same dead, heavy quiet. No birds, no insects, nothing. "This is wrong," Pete said. "Where are all the animals?" We walked for an hour, following the ridgeline. The smell came and went, that musky sulfur stench. My compass started spinning wildly whenever we got near certain rock formations. Then Pete grabbed my arm. "Jake, look." A tree ahead of us had been stripped of bark in 6 parallel lines. They ran from the ground all the way up 20 feet. The lines were perfectly spaced, each one about 4 inches wide. "No bear does that," Pete whispered. We heard the scream then, high and terrible, like a woman being murdered. But it came from 3 different directions at once, left, right, and behind us. The sound echoed off the cliffs, making it impossible to tell where it really came from. Pete had his hand on his pistol. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. I was watching the trees. Something was moving between them, something big and dark. It moved too fast, too smoothly. Not like any animal I'd ever seen. Then I saw the eyes. Yellow, glowing like hot coals. They were up in the trees, maybe 15 feet off the ground, watching us. "Pete," I said quietly, "don't run." The eyes blinked. Once, twice. Then they were gone. We stood there for maybe 5 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. The forest stayed silent. Finally, Pete spoke. "Tell me I didn't just see that." "You saw it." We started backing, away, keeping our eyes on the trees. We'd made it maybe 20 yards when we heard something behind us. A low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the earth itself. I spun around. Nothing there, just trees and shadows. "Let's get out of here," Pete said. We walked fast, not quite running, but close. The whole way back, I felt eyes on my back, watching, following, waiting. When we reached the trailhead, I turned to look back into the forest. For just a second, I saw it. A massive shape moving between the trees. Too big to be a cougar, too fast to be a bear, and it was moving on 6 legs. That night, Deputy Earl called me at home. His voice was shaking. "Jake, we found one of them. Mike Patterson's younger brother, Danny. He's alive, but..." Earl paused. "You need to see this." I drove to the hospital in town. They had Danny in a private room. When I walked in, I almost didn't recognize him. His hair had gone completely white. His eyes were wild, darting around the room like he was seeing things that weren't there. "Danny," I said softly, "it's Ranger Thornfield. Can you tell me what happened?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then he started to cry. "It had 6 legs, he whispered. 6 legs in Mama's voice. It called to me in Mama's voice, Jake. But when I got close, I saw its face. It wasn't Mama. It wasn't anything human." "Where are Mike and Thomas?" I asked. "It took them. Dragged them up into the trees like they weighed nothing. They were screaming, and I ran. God help me, I ran and left them there." His hands were shaking. I noticed long scratches on his arms, deep ones that would leave scars. "It spoke to me," Danny said. In Mama's voice, it told me I was trespassing. Told me the old blood demands payment. What does that mean, Jake? What old blood? I didn't have an answer. But I was starting to understand that this was bigger than just missing hunters. His was about something ancient, something that had been sleeping and was now wide awake. And it was hunting. The next morning, 2 more hunters went missing from a different area of the forest. These were locals, experienced men who knew the woods as well as I did. Their families called it in before noon. The state wildlife agency threatened to close the entire forest during peak hunting season. That would be a disaster for the local economy. Hotels, guides, equipment rentals. The whole town depended on hunting season money. My boss, District Supervisor Harris, called me into his office. "Thornfield, what the hell is going on out there?" "Something's wrong with the wildlife," I said carefully. "Predator behavior is unusual." "Unusual? We've got 5 missing men and 1 who's in the psych ward babbling about a 6-legged monster. The newspapers are going to eat us alive." He rubbed his face. Find whatever animal is doing this and put it down. You've got 48 hours before I have to close the forest. That afternoon, I went back to Mary Sixkiller's cabin. This time I brought Earl with me. Mary was outside, burning sage in a small bowl. The smoke rose straight up despite a steady breeze. It's getting stronger, she said without preamble. The more it hunts, the more solid it becomes. Soon it won't need to hide in shadows anymore. We found one of the hunters, I told her. He's alive but broken. Said it spoke to him in his dead mother's voice. Mary nodded like this wasn't surprising. Utlanta knows the voices of the dead. She guards them, speaks for them. If she used that voice, it means she's sending a message. What message? That someone has disturbed the peace of the ancestors. Someone has defiled sacred ground. Mary looked at me directly. When did the attack start, Jacob? I thought about it. About 3 weeks ago. We started getting reports of strange animal behavior around then. What happened 3 weeks ago? Any construction? Any digging? My stomach dropped. 3 weeks ago, a development company had started clearing landfall for a new resort about 5 miles from where the hunters vanished. The land had been sold by... Oh, God, I whispered. My family sold that land. My uncle sold it to the developers last month. Mary's expression didn't change, but I saw something in her eyes. Pity, maybe, or confirmation of something she'd already suspected. Then she's hunting your bloodline, Mary said quietly. The guardian always punishes those who betray the sacred places, and there's no punishment worse than watching those you love suffer. That night, I called my wife Sarah from the ranger station. I told her to take our son Tommy and go stay with her sister in Lexington. She argued at first. Jake, what's going on? You're scaring me. Please, Sarah, just trust me. Take Tommy and go. Don't come back until I call you. After she hung up, I sat alone in the dark station, listening to the radio static. Outside, the forest was completely black. No moonlight made it through the clouds. My radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static, but then I heard something underneath the noise. Singing. A woman's voice singing in Cherokee. I grabbed the microphone. This is Ranger Thornfield. Who's on this frequency? The singing stopped. Then a voice spoke, clear as day. Jacob Thornfield. Your grandfather knew the old ways. He respected the sacred places. But you sold them. You let them dig up the bones of my people. Who is this? My hand was shaking on the microphone. You know who I am. I walk on 6 legs now, but I remember being a woman. I remember having a name, and I remember the promises your grandfather made to protect this land. The radio went dead. I sat there in the darkness, my heart hammering. The smart thing would be to leave, get in my truck and drive away and never come back. Let someone else deal with this. But I was a ranger. This was my forest, my responsibility. And if Mary was right, running wouldn't help. Not if this thing was hunting my family. I grabbed my rifle and headed into the forest. The trail was barely visible in the darkness. I used my flashlight. But the beam seemed weak, like the darkness itself was eating the light. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made me spin around, rifle raised. I was heading toward the development site, toward the place where my uncle had sold the land. If that's where the burial grounds were disturbed, maybe that's where I'd find answers. The temperature dropped as I walked. My breath came out in thick clouds. Frost started forming on the trees even though it was only October. Then I heard the voices. Jake! Help me, Jake! It was Mike Patterson's voice, one of the missing hunters. It came from my left, deeper in the forest. Over here, please, I'm hurt! I knew it was a trap. Knew it wasn't really Mike. But what if it was? What if he was alive and needed help? I turned toward the voice. The forest opened into a small clearing. In the center, lit by pale moonlight breaking through the clouds, I saw it. The Wampus cat. It was massive, 8 feet long from nose to haunches, with shoulders as high as my chest. 6 legs, muscular and powerful. Its fur was dark, almost black, but shot through with silver streaks. And its eyes were yellow fire. But the worst part was its face. It had the broad head of a panther, but the features were slightly wrong, too human. I could see the ghost of a woman's face in those feline features. High cheekbones, full lips, tortured eyes. "You came," it said. The voice came from its mouth, but also from everywhere around me. "Brave, like your grandfather. But is it bravery or guilt that brings you here?" "I didn't know," I said. My voice came out as a whisper. "I didn't know about the burial grounds." "Ignorance is not innocence." The creature began to circle me. It moved with impossible grace, all 6 legs working in perfect coordination. "Your family took payment for land that was never yours to sell. The bones of my people were Scots," uttered. "Their rest was disturbed. Blood demands blood, Jacob Thornfield. Life demands life." My rifle was still in my hands, but I knew it was useless. You can't shoot a spirit. You can't kill a curse made flesh. "What do you want?" I asked. "Justice, protection, respect for what was taken." The Wampus cat stopped circling and faced me directly. "Your grandfather understood this. He made promises to my people. Promises that died when he died. Now the land is broken. The dead cry out, and I must answer their cries." "I'll fix it," I said. "Tell me how to fix it." The creature's eyes flared brighter. "Can you undig the graves? Can you return the bones to their rest? Can you rebuild what was destroyed?" "I'll try. I'll do whatever it takes." "Words," the Wampus cat hissed. "Your people are full of words. But the dead need more than words. They need action. They need—" The creature's head suddenly snapped to the side, looking past me, its ears flattened against its skull. "Go," it said. "Others come. They bring guns and ignorance. If you want to save them, take them away from this place. The sacred ground must not be violated further." I heard voices behind me, Earl and Pete, calling my name. They'd followed me into the forest. When I turned back, the Wampus cat was gone. Just empty moonlight and frost-covered ground. Earl and Pete burst into the clearing, both carrying rifles. "Jake, we heard screaming," Earl said. "Are you okay?" I looked at where the creature had been standing. 6-toed paw prints marked the frost, each one as clear as day. "We need to leave," I said. "Right now." A scream echoed through the forest, the same terrible woman's scream we'd heard before. But this time it was closer, and it was followed by others, a chorus of screams that seemed to come from the earth itself. We ran. Behind us, I heard trees crashing, the thud of heavy paws on frozen ground, and underneath it all, that voice, speaking in Cherokee, singing the death songs of her people. We made it to our trucks just as dawn started breaking. All 3 of us were covered in scratches from running through brambles. My lungs burned, my legs felt like rubber, but we were alive. For now. Mary Sixkiller came to the ranger station that afternoon. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, tired and worried. "It's spreading," she said. "Utlunta's rage is growing. Last night, farms 3 miles from the forest lost livestock. Not killed, drained. The animals were found arranged in circles, pointing toward the burial grounds." "What does that mean?" Pete asked. "It means she's gathering power, making a statement. Soon she'll be strong enough to leave the forest, to hunt in the towns." Mary looked at me. "We're running out of time, Jacob." I'd spent the morning on the phone with my uncle, the one who'd sold the land. He finally admitted that the development company had found some old bones during excavation. Instead of reporting them and dealing with the legal complications, they'd just disposed of them. Thrown Cherokee ancestors in a dumpster like trash. "I know what disturbed the burial site," I told Mary. "The developers found bones and destroyed them. They're still digging. The construction is ongoing." Mary closed her eyes. "Then she'll never stop. Not until every person involved is dead. And their families. And their families' families. This is blood debt now. This is the oldest kind of justice." "There has to be a way to stop this," Earl said. "We can't just let some ghost cat kill half the county." She's not a ghost, Mary said sharply. She's a guardian. She's doing exactly what she was made to do, protecting the sacred places. We're the ones who broke the covenant. We're the ones who must make it right. How? I asked. Mary was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, "We go to the burial grounds, tonight, during the new moon, when her power is strongest. We perform the ceremony of restoration. We acknowledge the wrong. We beg for forgiveness from the ancestors. And we make a blood oath to protect what remains." "And if that doesn't work?" Pete asked. "Then we die," Mary said simply. "But at least we'll die trying to fix what was broken." As the sun set that evening, we gathered our supplies. Mary brought sacred tobacco, herbs I didn't recognize, and a ceremonial knife. I brought my rifle, not to fight, but because I was still a ranger, and old habits die hard. Earl brought flashlights and rope. Pete brought a first aid kit and a video camera. "If this goes bad," Pete said, "at least someone will know what happened." We hiked to the development site just as darkness fell. The construction equipment sat silent, big yellow machines that looked like sleeping monsters in the fading light. Beyond them, I could see where they'd been digging: raw earth, exposed stone, and scattered fragments of pottery. Bones lay in piles, waiting to be carted away. "Oh God," I whispered, "there must be 100 people buried here." "More," Mary said quietly. "This was a major burial ground. Generations of my people rest here. Or they did until machines tore them from their sleep." She began setting up the ceremony. A circle of tobacco, 4 stones marking the cardinal directions. The herbs burning in a small bowl, sending up sweet-smelling smoke. As she worked, the temperature dropped. Frost formed on the ground. The construction equipment started to creak and groan, metal contracting in the sudden cold. "She's here," Mary said. "She knows what we're trying to do." Yellow eyes appeared in the darkness. Not just 2, but dozens. They ringed the entire excavation site, glowing like candles in the night. "Utlunta," Mary called out in Cherokee. Then in English, "We come to acknowledge wrong. We come to beg forgiveness. We come to make restoration." A voice answered from the darkness. That same woman's voice, but layered with something else. Something ancient and furious. "Restoration? You think words and smoke can restore the scattered bones of my people? You think a ceremony can undo the desecration?" The Wampus cat emerged from the shadows. In the darkness, she was even more terrifying. Her fur seemed to absorb light. Her 6 legs moved with predatory grace. And her face, that terrible human face trapped in animal form, showed only rage. "We offer blood," Mary said steadily. "Not in violence, but in covenant. Jacob Thornfield, whose family sold this land, offers his blood and his life in service to protecting what remains." I stepped forward, though every instinct screamed at me to run. Mary handed me the ceremonial knife. "Cut your palm," she said quietly. "Let your blood fall on the earth. Make the oath." I cut. It hurt, sharp and clean. Blood welled up and dripped onto the disturbed ground. "I, Jacob Thornfield, swear on my blood and my life to protect these sacred places, to restore what was taken, to honor the dead who rest here. I take responsibility for my family's betrayal. I offer my life in payment, if that's what justice demands." The Wampus cat moved closer. I could feel heat radiating from her body, could smell that musky, sulfur scent. She lowered her massive head and sniffed my bleeding hand. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she spoke. "Your grandfather made this same oath, Jacob Thornfield. He kept it until his death. But his death released his family from obligation, and they forgot. They betrayed. They sold what they had no right to sell." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Sorry does not resurrect the dead. Sorry does not restore desecrated graves. The creature's eyes burned brighter. "But an oath sworn in blood, that has power, that can bind." Mary started chanting in Cherokee, a prayer or invocation I couldn't understand. The wampus cat circled us slowly, all 6 legs moving in rhythm with the chant. "If you swear this oath," the creature said, "it binds not just you, but your son, and his son, and all who come from your blood. Jean, ration after generation, your family will guard this place. Break the oath, and I return. I am patient. I am eternal. I will wait 100 years if I must, but I always return." "I swear it," I said. The wampus cat lowered her head until her face was inches from mine. I could see the woman trapped inside the beast, could see centuries of pain and rage in those yellow eyes. "Then it is done," she said. "The dead accept your oath. The covenant is renewed. But know this, Jacob Thornfield, I am not gone. I am never gone. I sleep in the shadows of these mountains. And if your family breaks faith again—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The yellow eyes in the darkness began to fade. The temperature slowly rose. The wampus cat took a step back, then another. Her form became less solid, more shadow than substance. "We will find the scattered bones," Mary said. "We will return them to proper rest. We will mark this place as sacred, protect it from further harm." The wampus cat nodded once. Then she turned and walked into the darkness. All 6 legs moved in perfect synchronization. Within seconds, she was gone, like she'd never been there at all, except for the 6-toed paw prints in the frost, and the deep claw marks on the construction equipment, and the 2 bodies we found at the edge of the excavation site, Mike and Thomas Patterson, dead for days, but their bodies had been carefully arranged, hands crossed over their chests, respectfully laid to rest. The wampus cat had killed them, but she'd honored them in death. The official report said the Patterson brothers were killed by a rogue mountain lion. The state wildlife agency closed that section of forest for 2 weeks for wildlife management. Everyone accepted this explanation because it was simple, rational, and didn't require believing in impossible things. The construction company abandoned the development site. Unexplained equipment failures, worker injuries, and a mysterious fire that destroyed their office trailer convinced them to cut their losses. The land was eventually purchased by a conservation trust, purchased with money from a fund my grandfather had apparently set up years ago for exactly this purpose. I spent the next 6 months working with Mary and several Cherokee elders to locate every scattered bone from the excavation. We found most of them. The ones we couldn't find, we marked with sacred stones and prayers. The burial ground was properly blessed and consecrated. A fence was built, not to keep people out, but to mark the boundary of sacred ground. My son Tommy asks me sometimes why we visit those remote spots in the forest, why I teach him about respecting the old places. I tell him it's part of our family tradition, our family responsibility. Someday, when he's older, I'll tell him the whole truth. Because the wampus cat is still there. I've seen her tracks on foggy mornings, heard her screams echoing through the gorges on quiet nights. Sometimes, when I'm working alone in the deep forest, I feel eyes watching me from the shadows. But she doesn't hunt anymore, not unless someone threatens the sacred places. She's gone back to being what she was meant to be, a guardian, not a monster. Pete transferred to a different district, said he couldn't shake the nightmares. Earl still works as a deputy, but he doesn't go into the deep woods anymore. Danny Patterson never recovered. Last I heard, he was in a facility in Louisville, still seeing 6-legged shadows wherever he looks. As for me, I kept my oath. I'm the ranger for this section of forest, and I'll stay here until I can't work anymore. Then I'll pass the responsibility to Tommy, just like my grandfather tried to pass it to my father, who refused to believe. I won't make that mistake. Sometimes tourists ask me about the wampus cat. They've heard the stories, want to know if it's real. I tell them it's just a legend, a local folktale, but I also tell them to respect the 4 R's. See, to honor the old places, to never disturb what shouldn't be disturbed. Most of them laugh. They think it's all just superstitious nonsense. But sometimes, when they're hiking the trails at dusk, they'll see yellow eyes watching from the shadows. They'll hear screams that echo from impossible directions. They'll find tracks that are too big, too strange, with too many toes. And when they come back to the ranger station, pale and shaking, asking what they saw, I give them the same answer my grandfather gave me. Just your imagination, I tell them. These old mountains play tricks on the mind. Then I watch them drive away, and I go back to my work. Back to protecting the sacred places. Back to keeping the oath my family broke and I renewed. Because the Wampus Cat is real. She walks on 6 legs through the Kentucky mountains. She guards the bones of the dead and the sacred ground of her people. And as long as my family keeps faith, she'll let us live. But she never sleeps. She never forgets. And she's always watching. If you ever find yourself hiking through the Red River Gorge, especially near Clifty Wilderness, remember this story. Respect the trails. Honor the old places. And if you see yellow eyes watching you from the darkness, if you hear a woman's voice calling from impossible directions, if you find tracks with 6 toes instead of 4, walk away. Don't investigate. Don't disturb. Just walk away. Because some oaths are written in blood, some guardians never rest, and some debts can span generations. The Wampus Cat taught me that, and I'll never forget it. My name is Jacob Thornfield. I'm a ranger in Daniel Boone National Forest, and I know the truth about what walks in these mountains. I know, and I keep my oath. Every single day. My name is Robert Ashford, and I've been a ranger in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest for 19 years. Before that, I spent 12 years working coal mines with my daddy and my brother Tommy. That's how I know these mountains, not just the surface, but what's underneath, the bones of this place. I'm telling you this because you need to understand I'm not some city kid who gets spooked by shadows. I grew up in coal country. I've been a mile underground when the lights went out. I've pulled men from collapsed tunnels and carried bodies out of shafts that never should have been dug. I've heard every ghost story, every monster tale, every piece of folklore these mountains have to offer. Never believed a word of it. Especially not the stories about the white thing. You hear about it sometimes, if you spend enough time in the hollows around Charleston. Miners used to talk about it when I was coming up. This big white creature that lived in the deepest shafts, way back in the sealed sections, nobody was supposed to go. Most guys figured it was just an albino bear maybe. Something that got trapped underground and went pale from never seeing sunlight. I always thought it was bull. Just stories miners told to scare the new guys, or maybe something they saw after breathing bad air too long. That was before January 1976, before we found what was in the Whitehall mine. It started with a call from my supervisor on a Tuesday morning. 3 college kids from Marshall University had gotten permission to explore some of the old limestone caves near the abandoned mining operations. They were doing research for a geology project or something. Young, eager, the kind who think they're invincible. They'd found something in one of the old mine shafts, something that made them call the authorities instead of just taking pictures and leaving. Ashford, my supervisor said, "You know, those old caves better than anyone. State police need someone to go down there with them. Kids are saying they found bones, lots of bones." I drove out there in my truck through snow that was coming down thick and heavy. The mine had been closed since 1962 after a collapse killed 4 men. One of them had been my uncle. These hills are full of places like that. Scars from when coal was king and men were cheap. The college kids were waiting by their van, looking pale and shaken. One girl was crying. The state police were already there. 2 officers I knew, Jim Hawkins and Pete Rodriguez. "Show us what you found," I said. The girl who wasn't crying, her name was Sarah, pointed toward the old mine entrance. Someone had cut through the chain-link fence that was supposed to keep people out. "We didn't mean to go far," she said. "Just wanted to see the main shaft, but there was this opening, like a side tunnel. And the smell." "What kind of smell?" I asked. "Like something died, but worse. And there were arrangements." That word stuck with me. Arrangements. I grabbed my gear from the truck, headlamp, rope, first aid kit, and the gas detector I always carried for mine work. The detector measured oxygen levels and checked for methane or carbon monoxide. Down in old mines, bad air could kill you before you even knew something was wrong. We went in. The main shaft was like most abandoned mines. Timbers rotting, rails rusted, everything covered in dust and bat droppings. My headlamp cut through the darkness, showing the pathway that had been carved out 100 years ago. But then we reached the side tunnel Sarah had mentioned. Someone had dug through a wall here, not recently, but not originally either. This wasn't part of the mine's design. The opening led into a natural limestone cave, the kind that had been here millions of years before anyone thought to dig for coal. That is where the smell hit me. Sarah was right. It was death, but not normal death. This was old and thick and wrong, like something had been rotting down here for years. And then I saw the bones. They were everywhere, piled in corners, arranged in circles, stacked in patterns that made no sense. Some were old, brown and crumbling. Others looked fresher. I saw deer skulls, bare bones, what looked like a cow's ribcage. But mixed in were others I couldn't identify. Too big, wrong shape. Jesus, Pete muttered behind me. My gas detector started beeping. The numbers were off. Oxygen was lower than it should be, but not dangerously low. Temperature was wrong too. It was colder in here than it had any right to be, even in January. I knelt down next to one of the bone piles. That's when I saw the marks. Something had gnawed on these. The tooth marks were massive. Whatever had done this had jaws that could crack a femur like a chicken bone. And the bones weren't scattered randomly. Someone, or something, had placed them deliberately, created patterns, arrangements. We need to document this and call the state archaeologist, I said, standing up. Could be Native American burial sites. Could be... That's when we heard it. Deep in the cave. Deeper than my headlamp could reach. A sound like breathing. Heavy, slow, rhythmic. And underneath it, something else. A low rumble that I felt in my chest more than heard. We all froze. The breathing stopped. Wind, Jim said. Just air currents through the cave system. But I'd been in enough caves to know what wind sounded like. That wasn't wind. We're leaving, I said. Now. Nobody goes back in here until we figure out what we're dealing with. We backed out of that cave, and I'll admit something. I was scared. Not spooked. Not uneasy. Scared. Because in 19 years of working search and rescue in these mountains, I'd never heard anything like that sound. And I'd never seen bones arranged like that. That night, lying in bed, I kept seeing those patterns. Kept hearing that breathing. Kept thinking about the old stories. The Ness I'd never believed. The ones about the white thing. The state archaeologist arrived 2 days later. Her name was Dr. Margaret Stone, and she'd driven up from the university in Charleston. She was in her 50s, gray-haired, with the kind of weathered face that comes from spending more time outdoors than in. "Show me," she said. We went back in, just the two of us. I'd tried to get Jim and Pete to come, but they'd suddenly remembered they had other cases to work. The college kids had already gone back to Marshall, probably failing their geology project, but not caring. Dr. Stone brought her own equipment, cameras, measuring tools, sample bags. She worked quietly, methodically, photographing everything before touching anything. "These arrangements," she said finally, "they're not Native American. Wrong style, wrong materials. And some of these bones, Robert, come look at this." She was holding up what looked like a rib bone, but it was huge, bigger than anything I'd ever seen. "What animal is that from?" I asked. "That's the problem. I don't know. The size suggests something massive. Bear, maybe, but the curvature is wrong, and these marks..." She pointed to deep grooves in the bone. "These are tooth marks, from something with a jaw that would make a grizzly look small." My gas detector started beeping again. Same as before. Wrong temperature, weird oxygen levels. But this time I noticed something else. The reading kept fluctuating, like something was interfering with it. "Do you smell that?" Dr. Stone asked. I did. That same death smell, but stronger now. And underneath it, something else. Ammonia, strong and sharp. "We should go," I said. "In a moment, I want to see what's deeper in." "Dr. Stone..." but she was already moving, her headlamp beam cutting into the darkness beyond where we'd explored before. I followed because I couldn't let her go alone. That's what we do in search and rescue. Nobody goes anywhere alone. The cave opened up as we went deeper. The ceiling rose higher, the walls spread wider. This wasn't a mine anymore. This was a natural cavern, probably connected to the whole limestone system that ran under these mountains. And that's when we found the first fresh kill. It was a deer, a big buck, maybe 200 pounds. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended somehow in what looked like a web of roots and vines. But when I got closer, I realized they weren't roots. They were bones, small bones, woven together with what looked like wire or cable. Old mining cable, rusted and frayed. The deer had been there maybe a day. Its throat was torn out. Its belly was opened, organs gone. But what made my skin crawl was how it was positioned, deliberately hung, like a piece of meat in a butcher shop. "Someone's living down here," Dr. Stone whispered. "Something," I corrected. That's when my headlamp died. Just like that. 1 second I could see, the next I was in complete darkness. I'd changed the batteries that morning. They should have lasted 8 hours. "Robert?" Dr. Stone's voice was tight with fear. "Stay calm. I've got a backup." Her light went out too. We stood in darkness so complete it felt solid. I could hear Dr. Stone breathing fast, starting to panic. I reached out, found her arm, held it. "Don't move," I said quietly. "I've got a carbide lamp in my pack. Just need to..." Something moved in the darkness ahead of us. I heard it, heavy footsteps on stone. Not walking, moving, fast, coming closer. And then the breathing started again. That same deep, rhythmic sound. But this time it was close, maybe 20 feet away, maybe less. I fumbled with my pack, pulled out the old carbide lamp my daddy had given me. My hands were shaking. I could hear Dr. Stone whimpering beside me, could hear that thing moving in the dark, could hear... The lamp caught. Weak yellow light filled the space around us, and I saw it. Just for a second, just a glimpse at the edge of the light. Something massive, something white, moving, with a fluid grace that nothing that big should have. And eyes, reflecting the carbide light like mirrors. Intelligent eyes. Then it was gone. Moving deeper into the cave with impossible speed, our headlamps came back on. "Did you see?" Dr. Stone started. "We're leaving, now." I didn't give her a choice. I grabbed her arm and pulled her back toward the entrance, moving as fast as I could without running, because running would trigger prey instinct in whatever that was, and I knew deep in my bones that we were being hunted. We made it out, stood in the snow outside the mine entrance, breathing hard, both of us shaking. "What was that?" Dr. Stone asked. I thought about lying, thought about saying it was a bear or a trick of the light or our imagination. But I'm not a liar. "I don't know," I said, "but we're not going back in there alone." That night, I drove to see Ezra Whitman. He was 83 years old, had worked the mines for 40 years before retiring. If anyone knew the truth about what was down there, it would be him. He was sitting on his porch when I arrived, despite the cold, like he'd been waiting for me. "You found it," he said. Not a question. "The white thing?" He nodded slowly. "Been down there since before my time. Maybe before anybody's time. We sealed those shafts in '52, after it took Billy Cooper. Thought that would be enough. Thought it would stay in its territory." "What is it?" "Don't know. My granddaddy said the old Cherokee called it a guardian. Said it protected the burial caves from when their people lived here before the white men came. Said when we started mining, we broke through into its home. It adapted. Learned to live with the mines, in the mines. But it's still protecting something down there." "It killed someone?" "Billy went too deep. Found the old burial chamber. Thing dragged him down there. We found him 3 days later. Alive, but not right in the head. Kept saying the white giant was watching him. That it would always be watching." Ezra looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You opened those seals, didn't you?" Those college kids cut through them. I nodded. Then it knows you're there, and it won't stop until you're gone, or you're dead, or you respect the boundaries. I drove home that night thinking about Billy Cooper, about boundaries, about things that lived in the dark and protected secrets we'd forgotten, and about those eyes watching me from the darkness. The next morning, one of the college kids was missing. Sarah called me at 6 a.m., hysterical. Her friend Marcus hadn't come back to the dorm. His roommate said he'd left around midnight, saying he needed to go back to the cave, that he'd forgotten his camera. He was acting weird, Sarah said. Kept talking about the patterns in the bones, said they meant something, said he needed to document them properly. I called Jim and Pete. We met at the mine entrance an hour later. The chain-link fence had been cut again, fresh this time. Inside the entrance, we found Marcus's camera. It was smashed, like something had stepped on it. The memory card was intact. Pete had a laptop in his cruiser. We pulled up the photos. The first dozen were normal, pictures of the bone arrangements, the cave walls, the hanging deer. Then they got weird. Marcus had gone deeper than we had. Way deeper. The photos showed passages we hadn't explored, chambers that opened up like cathedrals, and in the last photo, in the background, just barely visible in the flash, a massive white hand, pressed against the wall. The fingers were easily 18 inches long. Jesus Christ, Jim muttered. We went in. Full rescue protocol this time. Ropes, backup lights, climbing gear, first aid supplies. Pete stayed at the entrance with the radio, ready to call for backup if we didn't come out in 2 hours. The bones had been rearranged since our last visit. Now they formed a wall, a barrier, a clear message, stay out. We went deeper anyway. H, add 2. Marcus might still be alive. The ammonia smell was stronger. The temperature had dropped even more. I could see my breath, thick clouds in the headlamp beam. And everywhere, on every surface, we found marks. Scratches in the limestone, deep gouges that went through rock like it was chalk. Some were old, worn smooth by time. Others were fresh, sharp, recent. This thing is massive, Jim said, running his hand along one of the scratch marks. Gotta be 10, 12 feet tall. Look how high these go. We found Marcus in what Ezra had called the burial chamber. It was a natural cathedral in the rock, maybe 60 feet high, 100 feet across. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, real Native American art, petroglyphs that had to be centuries old. And in the center, Marcus was alive. Suspended in another one of those bone arrangements, held up by carefully woven cables and roots and bones. He was unconscious but breathing. Get him down, I said, fast. Jim and I worked together, cutting through the strange web that held him. Marcus fell into our arms, mumbling, eyes rolling back. White giant, he whispered. Watching, always watching. Same words Billy Cooper had used, according to Ezra. That's when we heard it behind us. The breathing. Close now. Very close. I turned, my headlamp sweeping across the chamber. It was there, standing at the entrance we'd come through, blocking our exit. 10 feet tall, easily, maybe more. Covered in white fur that looked almost luminescent in our lights. Its arms hung down to its knees, ending in hands that could palm a basketball. Its face was almost human. High forehead, deep-set eyes that reflected our lights with an eerie green glow. But the jaw was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. It stood perfectly still, watching us. Don't run, I said quietly. Back away slow, toward the other exit. What other exit? Jim asked, his voice tight with terror. There's always another exit. Caves like this, they connect. We just need to... The thing moved, not toward us. It reached out and grabbed one of the massive limestone columns that held up the ceiling, and it pulled. The column broke. Tons of rock and stone crashed down, blocking the entrance behind it, sealing us in. Go! I yelled. We ran, carrying Marcus between us, his feet dragging on the stone. Behind us, I heard the creature moving. Heard it roar, a sound that shook dust from the ceiling, that made my bones vibrate. Jim's headlamp found an opening in the far wall. We squeezed through, pulling Marcus after us, into a narrow passage that forced us to move single file. Behind us, the creature was coming. I could hear it tearing through rock, widening the passage. Heard its breath, hot and reeking of old death. The passage opened up into another chamber. This one had an exit. I could feel air moving, could see a faint hint of light far above. An old mining shaft, one of the vertical ones, with iron rungs driven into the wall. "Climb," I shouted to Jim. "Get him up." Jim started up, pulling Marcus with him. I turned, pulling out my carbide lamp, holding it up. The creature emerged from the passage. In the fuller light, I could see it clearly now. This wasn't some mindless beast. It stood upright, looked at me with eyes that showed intelligence, awareness. It opened its mouth, showing teeth the size of my fingers, and made a sound. Not a roar this time, something else. Almost like words, but in no language I'd ever heard. I backed toward the shaft, kept my light on it, watched as it watched me. "Robert," Jim called from above. "Come on." I grabbed the rungs and started climbing, fast as I could. Below me, the creature moved to the bottom of the shaft, looked up at me, and then it did something that made my blood run cold. It started climbing too, pulling itself up the shaft with casual ease, moving faster than I could climb. "Go, go, go!" I screamed. We burst out into daylight. The shaft opened up near an old strip, mine, half a mile from where we'd gone in. Jim was already on the radio, calling for emergency services. Marcus was breathing, but still unconscious. His clothes were torn, and there were bruises on his arms and legs, like he'd been grabbed. Hard. "What was that thing?" Jim asked, his hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. I looked back at the shaft entrance. In the darkness below, I saw two green lights, eyes watching us. "Something old," I said. "Something that doesn't want us down there. We need to seal those caves, all of them, permanently." "No," I said, still watching those eyes. "I don't think that would work. I don't think this thing has been sealed in. I think it's been choosing to stay there, protecting something." "Protecting what?" I thought about the burial chamber, the ancient art, the deliberate arrangements. Something that matters more than we do. The ambulance arrived and took Marcus. He woke up 3 days later in the hospital. Doctors said he was fine physically, but he wouldn't talk about what happened. Wouldn't even look at pictures of the cave. Just kept drawing the same thing over and over, a massive white hand reaching out of the darkness. Dr. Stone came back 2 days after that. Brought a Cherokee consultant with her, an elder named Joseph Whitehorse. "We need to go back in," she said. "Are you insane? We need to understand what's down there, what it's protecting, and we need to make peace with it." "Make peace?" I stared at her. "That thing nearly killed us." Joseph spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, gentle. "It didn't kill you. That's important. It could have, but it didn't. It warned you, showed you its strength. That's not aggression. That's boundary setting. It's a monster. It's a guardian," he corrected. "And if Dr. Stone is right about what's in those burial chambers, it has every right to protect them." I thought about that, about the intelligence in those eyes, about how it could have killed us in a dozen different ways, but hadn't. "What do you want to do?" "Go back," Dr. Stone said. "But properly this time, with respect, with offerings, with acknowledgement of what that thing is protecting. And if it doesn't accept," she looked at me steadily, "then we don't go back, ever. We seal the entrances, reroute any mining operations, and we leave it alone." I called a meeting with the state authorities, explained what we'd found, what we'd seen. Half of them thought I was crazy. The other half wanted to send in a team with guns. "No," I said, "no guns, no confrontation. We do this peacefully, or we don't do it at all." It took 2 weeks to get approval. 2 weeks of arguing, explaining, showing them the photos and the evidence. 2 weeks of having nightmares about white hands reaching out of darkness. And during those 2 weeks, the creature made its presence known. A mining operation 10 miles away reported finding massive white handprints in one of their shafts. A hiker found a deer arranged in bones near the cave entrance. A clear warning. My truck was covered in scratches one morning, deep gouges in the metal like something had run its claws across it while I slept. It knew who I was. It was watching me. Finally, we got permission. One expedition, Dr. Stone, Joseph, me, and a state anthropologist named Carl Brewster, who had mining experience. 4 of us, going into the darkness to meet a monster, to try and make peace. We went in at midnight on February 14th, 1976. Valentine's Day, ironically. The night was cold, no moon, just stars and snow reflecting what little light there was. Joseph had prepared traditional offerings, tobacco, sage, cornmeal. These are old protocols, he explained, from when my people lived in these mountains. Respect for sacred spaces, acknowledgement of the guardians. Carl carried the mining equipment, the lights, the safety gear, the gas detectors. I had the rope and climbing equipment. Dr. Stone had her cameras and documentation, tools. We stood at the entrance and Joseph performed a ceremony. Spoke in Cherokee, his words echoing into the darkness. Burned sage and scattered cornmeal. We're announcing ourselves, he said. Showing respect. Whatever's down there, it needs to know we're not here to violate its territory. We entered the main shaft. The bones had been rearranged again. Now they formed a path, leading deeper. It's guiding us, Dr. Stone whispered. We followed the bone path through passages we'd explored before, then deeper, into chambers I'd never seen. The walls here were covered in more ancient art. Hunting scenes, ritual dances, figures that looked almost like they were floating. My gas detector started acting up again. But this time I understood. It wasn't malfunctioning. It was detecting something else. Something the instruments weren't designed to measure. We're in a sacred space, Joseph said quietly. The atmosphere is different, spiritually different. The path led us to the burial chamber. But this time, with better lights, I could see what I'd missed before. This wasn't just one burial site. It was dozens, hundreds. Alcoves carved into the walls held wrapped bundles, bodies, preserved by the cave's atmosphere. Some were ancient, just bones and dust. Others looked newer, maybe 100 years old. This is a generational burial site, Dr. Stone said, her voice full of awe. Cherokee people buried their dead here for centuries. This is sacred ground. And standing in the center of the chamber, waiting for us, was the white thing. In the better light, I could see details I'd missed before. The white fur wasn't natural. It was almost luminescent, like it generated its own light. The creature's face was almost human, but ancient, wise. Its eyes watched us with an intelligence that made me feel small. It's beautiful, Dr. Stone whispered. It was. Terrifying, yes, but beautiful. Joseph stepped forward, holding out the offerings. He spoke in Cherokee, long, fluid sentences I couldn't understand. The creature listened, tilting its massive head. Then it responded, not in Cherokee, not in English, but in sounds that somehow conveyed meaning. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the message. This is my charge. These are my people. This is my purpose. When the white men came, Joseph translated, when they began digging their tunnels, breaking through the stone, this guardian adapted. It learned to live in the new passages, to use the human's own constructions to protect what needed protecting. The creature moved then, gesturing with one massive hand, showing us the alcoves, the burial bundles, the sacred art. It's been alone, Dr. Stone said softly. For how long? Decades? Centuries? Just doing its duty, protecting these graves while the world above forgot they existed. Carl knelt down, examining some of the bones we'd seen arranged in patterns. These aren't random, he said. They're markers, warnings. It was telling us this place was important, that we needed to respect it. I thought about Billy Cooper, about Marcus, about the fear and the terror. Did it have to hurt people? I asked. Joseph spoke to the creature again. The response came in those strange, meaningful sounds. It says it only defended. When people came to defile, to steal, to destroy, it never killed, only frightened, only showed its strength. I realized he was right. Marcus had been held, not hurt. We'd been chased, not caught. Even when it could have easily killed us, it had chosen not to. What does it want? I asked. Joseph listened to the creature's response. Acknowledgement. Protection. A promise that these graves will not be disturbed, that mining operations will not reach this place, that its duty will be honored. We can do that, I said. I can make sure the state protects this area. The creature looked at me, those green eyes reflecting my headlamp, seeing into me. Then it nodded, one slow, deliberate nod. We have an agreement, Joseph said. But the creature wasn't done. It moved to the far wall, where the shadows were deepest, pressed its massive hand against the stone. A section of wall swung inward, a hidden passage. It was inviting us deeper. Should we? Carl started. Yes, Dr. Stone said firmly. It's offering to show us something. We need to see. We followed the creature through the hidden passage. It had to hunch over to fit, moving carefully so as not to crush us with its bulk. The passage opened into a final chamber, smaller than the others, but somehow more important. The walls here were covered in handprints, hundreds of them, thousands. White handprints pressed into the stone, some ancient, barely visible, others fresh. These are its marks, Joseph whispered, records of its guardianship. Each print represents, what, a year, a decade? Longer, the creature said. We all froze. It had spoken, in English. The word was distorted, rumbling, but clear. Longer, it repeated. So much longer. How long have you been here? Dr. Stone asked gently. The creature reached out, touched the oldest handprints. Before your people, before the digging people, before many peoples. Centuries, I said. You've been here for centuries. Duty, it said simply. Promise. Guard. I understood then. This wasn't a monster. It was a being who had made a promise so long ago that even it might have forgotten who the promise was made to. But it kept that promise anyway, through centuries, through mining and disruption and fear. It was the last guardian of a forgotten people. We'll help you, I said. I promise. We'll make sure this place is protected, that you can keep your duty. The creature looked at me again. Then it did something that made my heart ache. It pressed its massive hand against my chest, gentle, careful, like a benediction. Thank you, it said. We left the salle, as dawn was breaking. The creature stayed behind, returning to its eternal watch. The state declared the entire cave system a protected archaeological site within a month. Mining. Operations were rerouted. The entrances were sealed, not to trap the creature, but to keep people out, to preserve the sanctity of the burial chambers. Dr. Stone published a paper on the site, carefully leaving out any mention of the guardian. Some things don't need to be explained to the wider world. Joseph performed a proper ceremony at the entrance, acknowledging the guardian and its duty. He left offerings every full moon after that until he passed away 5 years later. I transferred to managing the protection of the site, made it my job to ensure nobody disturbed it. It's been my purpose for the last 3 years. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I visit the sealed entrance, leave tobacco and cornmeal like Joseph taught me, and sometimes, in the darkness beyond the seal, I see 2 green lights, watching, acknowledging. The white thing is still there. still keeping its promise, still protecting the forgotten dead. Marcus recovered mostly. He never went near caves again, became an accountant. Sometimes he sends me letters asking if I still see it. I always tell him yes. Carl retired from state service and became a consultant on sacred site protection. He and I work together sometimes, identifying other places that might need guardianship, might need respect. Dr. Stone died last year, heart attack in her sleep. At her funeral, I told the story of what we'd found, what we'd learned, how sometimes monsters are just guardians we forgot to honor. And sometimes, in other abandoned mines, other cave systems, hikers report seeing something white moving in the darkness, something massive and careful. I always investigate, always leave offerings, always acknowledge. Because I've learned the truth about these mountains. We're not the first ones here, and we won't be the last. But some things remain, keeping promises we've forgotten we made, protecting what we no longer remember, is sacred. The white thing of Whitehall still guards its burial chambers, and I still guard the secret of what really lives in those caves. Not because people wouldn't believe me, but because some things deserve to remain mysterious. Some duties are too old, too important, to be reduced to scientific papers and news reports. I'm telling you this story now because the mines are opening again. New companies, new technology, new tunnels being dug. And I need people to understand. If you're in these mountains, if you find old mine entrances, old cave systems, and you see bones arranged in patterns, don't disturb them. Don't go deeper. Don't disrespect what you don't understand. Because somewhere in those hills, in the darkest shafts and the deepest caves, guardians are still keeping their promises, and they're still watching. Always watching. My name is Robert Ashford. I've been protecting these mountains for 19 years, and I'll keep protecting them until the White Thing's duty is done, which is to say, forever. My name is Elizabeth Hawthorne, but everyone calls me Liz. I've been a park ranger for 13 years now, working in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee. Before that, I was studying for my PhD in wildlife biology. I left school 3 credits short of my doctorate because I realized I'd rather be in the woods than in a lab. I'm telling you this so you understand I'm a scientist. I believe in facts, in evidence, in things you can measure and test. I've spent over a decade tracking bears, counting elk, studying endangered species. I've hiked every trail in this park, some of them trails that don't appear on any map. I've spent countless nights alone in these mountains. I never believed in the wild man stories, not once, until May of 1985. The assignment seemed simple enough. The red cockaded woodpecker population was declining, and my supervisor wanted me to do a survey in the Cataract Falls section, up above 4,000 feet. It's remote up there, 8 miles from the nearest parking lot, surrounded by what locals call laurel hells. These are thick tangles of mountain laurel and rhododendrons so dense you can't walk through them. You have to crawl or go around, sometimes adding miles to your trip. I didn't mind. That's why I took this job. I like being alone in the wilderness. I started my hike at dawn on May 3rd. The laurels were blooming, their pink and white flowers covering the mountainside like snow. It was beautiful. The morning was cool, maybe 50 degrees, and mist hung in the valleys below. I could hear water rushing somewhere in the distance, probably Cataract Falls, though I was still 2 miles away. I followed my survey route, stopping every quarter mile to record bird calls. The woodpeckers have a very specific call, like a quick series of chirps. They also make a distinctive tapping sound when they drill into trees. After 13 years, I can identify that sound in my sleep. But that morning I didn't hear it at all. That wasn't unusual at first. These birds are rare, that's why I was looking for them. But as I hiked deeper into the survey area, I noticed something else. I wasn't hearing any birds. No chickadees, no warblers, no crows. Nothing. The forest was completely silent. I stopped at my 3rd survey point and pulled out my recorder. It was one of those big cassette tape machines, heavy as a brick. I held it up and pressed record, waiting. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. Not a single bird call. I've been doing wildlife surveys for over a decade. You always hear something. Always. Even in winter, even at night, there's some kind of bird making noise. But this forest was dead quiet, like someone had hit a mute button on the whole mountain. I felt the first prickle of unease run down my back. I'm not a nervous person. I've faced down black bears, climbed cliffs, weathered storms in a tent. But something about that silence felt wrong. Not just unusual. Wrong. Like the forest was holding its breath. I packed up my recorder and kept hiking, telling myself I was being silly. Maybe there was a hawk nearby, scaring off the smaller birds. Maybe the weather was changing. There had to be a logical explanation. The trail climbed steadily upward, winding through those laurel thickets. The flowers smelled sweet, almost too sweet, like perfume. I pushed through a narrow gap between two huge rhododendron bushes and came out into a small clearing. That's when I saw the first structure. At first I thought it was just fallen trees. We get winter storms up here that knock down timber all the time. But as I got closer, I realized these trees hadn't fallen. They'd been broken. Thick branches, some of them 6 or 8 inches across, snapped cleanly in half and arranged in a pattern. They formed a root. Were teepee shape, maybe 10 feet tall, with the broken ends all pointing upward. I walked around it slowly. The breaks were fresh. I could see white wood where the bark had split. Some kind of animal had done this. Something strong, very strong. A bear, maybe? But bears don't build structures. They don't arrange branches in geometric patterns. I took out my camera and snapped several photos. Then I pulled out my field notebook and started writing down observations. Location, time, measurements. That's what scientists do. We document. I was so focused on my notes that I almost didn't notice the smell. It hit me all at once. A thick, musky odor, like wet dog mixed with something sharper, something wild. I looked up from my notebook and scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. But that smell was strong and getting stronger. Something was watching me. I could feel it. I've spent enough time in the woods to trust that feeling. Your body knows things before your brain does. Every animal instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to run. But I'm a scientist. I needed more data. I pulled out my compass and marked the location of the structure, then continued up the trail. I told myself I'd do one more survey point, then head back down and report what I'd found. I never made it to that survey point. Half a mile up the trail, I found 3 more structures. These were bigger, more complex. Branches woven together, creating patterns that looked almost deliberate. Some of the trees were bent over and tied down, not with rope, but with other branches twisted around them. The engineering was sophisticated, nothing like random storm damage, and the smell was everywhere now, that musky, wild scent soaking into my clothes, coating the back of my throat. I photographed everything, my hands shaking slightly as I adjusted the camera settings. The scientist in me was fascinated. The animal part of my brain was terrified. I found the first footprint near the largest structure. It was in a patch of soft mud near a tiny spring. At first glance, it looked almost human. 5 toes, a an arch. But it was huge. I pulled out my tape measure and knelt down beside it. 18 inches long, 7 inches wide. I stared at that print for a long time, my mind trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Black bears have 5 toes, but their prints look nothing like this. This print belonged to something that walked on 2 legs, something that weighed maybe 400 or 500 pounds based on how deep it sank into the mud. Something that shouldn't exist. I was mixing plaster in my canteen cup when I heard the sound. It came from somewhere up the mountain, echoing through the laurel thickets. A long, loud call, not quite a howl, not quite a scream. It was too deep to be human, too structured to be an animal. It rose and fell in a pattern like someone was trying to communicate. The sound vibrated in my chest. I could feel it in my bones. I stood up slowly, leaving the plaster to set, and turned toward the sound. My hand went to the radio on my belt. Standard protocol. If you encounter something unusual or dangerous, you call it in. But my fingers stopped on the dial. What would I say? That I found big footprints and heard a weird noise? They'd think I was losing it. After 13 years of service, they'd start wondering if I'd been alone in the woods too long. The call came again, closer this time. Something big was moving through the forest, coming down the mountain toward me. I could hear branches breaking, the crash of something heavy pushing through the undergrowth. Whatever it wasn't trying to be quiet. Every survival instinct I had told me to run. But I'm trained for wildlife encounters. You don't run from predators. That triggers their chase instinct. You make yourself big, make noise, back away slowly. But what if it wasn't a predator? What if it was something else entirely? I grabbed my camera and moved behind a large oak tree, pressing my back against the bark. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I raised the camera and pointed it toward the sound. The crashing got louder, closer, maybe 50 yards away. Now. Then everything went silent again. I held my breath, camera ready, eyes scanning the laurel thickets. The flowers looked almost too bright in the afternoon sun, pink and white blossoms nodding gently in the breeze. Nothing moved, but I knew with absolute certainty that something was standing just beyond that wall of green, watching me, studying me, deciding what to do. Minutes passed. My arms started to ache from holding the camera up. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool mountain air. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Then I saw it, just for a second, maybe two. A shape moved behind the laurels, tall, impossibly tall, dark against the bright flowers. Not walking on four legs like a bear, standing upright, like a person. But no person was that big. I pressed the shutter. The camera clicked and whirred as it advanced the film. The shape froze. Then it moved again, this time faster, crashing back up the mountain away from me. I could track its progress by the sound. Branches breaking, rocks sliding, the heavy thud of something large moving at speed. Then silence again. I stayed behind that tree for another 10 minutes, not moving, barely breathing. When I finally lowered the camera, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I looked down at the footprint. The plaster had set. I popped it out of the mud, wrapped it carefully in my jacket, and packed everything else as fast as I could. I didn't run down the mountain. That would have been stupid, dangerous. But I walked fast, checking over my shoulder every few steps. That smell followed me all the way down, that wild, musky scent, like something was trailing behind me, just out of sight. I reached my truck 3 hours later. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky orange and purple. I threw my gear in the back and locked the doors. Only then did I let myself admit how scared I'd been. I drove straight to the ranger station and went to find Dr. James Brennan. James was the park's chief wildlife biologist, the man who'd mentored me when I first started. If anyone would believe me, it would be him. I found him in his office, eating a sandwich and reviewing survey data. He looked up when I walked in, saw my face, and put down his food. "What happened?" he asked. I told him everything. The silence, the structures, the footprint, the call, the shape I'd seen. I showed him my photos and the plaster cast. I watched his face carefully, waiting for the skepticism, the concern that I might be cracking under the pressure. But James just studied the footprint, turning it over in his hands. Then he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something like fear, mixed with excitement. "I need to show you something," he said. "Something I've never told anyone." He pulled out a file from his locked desk drawer. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Footprints, tree structures, claw marks on trees, all from different locations in the park, all documented over the past 20 years. "I've been collecting these since 1965, James said quietly. "Every ranger who's worked here long enough eventually finds something like this. And every time, we're told to keep quiet about it. The Park Service doesn't want panic, doesn't want the publicity." I stared at the photos, my hands cold. "What is it?" James looked out his window at the dark mountains. "The Cherokee called it Kekla Kudla, the forest guardian. They said it protects the wild places from human interference." He turned back to me. I think they were right. You think it's real, I said. You think there's actually something up there. I know there is, James said. And Liz, if you found what I think you found, you've just entered its territory. It knows you're there now. It's seen you. The way he said it made my blood run cold. What do I do? I asked. James closed the file slowly. Tomorrow, we go back up together. We document everything properly, scientifically. We prove this thing exists. And maybe, just maybe, we figure out what it wants. I should have said no. Should have walked away right then. But I'm a scientist. And scientists need to know the truth. Okay, I said. Tomorrow. I wish I could take back that word. That single word that changed everything. We started up the trail at first light. James was 62 years old, but still in good shape. He kept pace with me easily, his breath steady even on the steep sections. He carried better equipment than I had, professional-grade cameras, audio recorders, sample collection kits. We were going to document this properly. The forest was silent again. No birds, no squirrels, no insects, just our boots on the trail and the distant rush of water. It's too quiet, James said. He'd noticed it too. We reached the first structure around 9 a.m. James circled it slowly, taking photos from every angle. He measured the broken branches, tested their thickness, examined the break patterns. These trees are green, he said. Fresh. Whatever did this has grip strength beyond anything natural. A gorilla couldn't break branches this thick. He looked up at me. And gorillas don't live in Tennessee. We moved to the second location, the one with the footprint. James made more casts, took more photos. He was completely focused, the way scientists get when they're onto something big. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in the mirror when I discovered my first rare bird nest. But I couldn't focus. That smell was back, stronger than before, and I had the crawling sensation that we were being watched. James, I said quietly, something's here. He looked up from his camera. What? I can feel it. We need to move. That's when the rock hit the tree next to us. It was maybe the size of a softball, and it hit hard enough to crack the bark. Both of us jumped back, staring at the impact point. Then another rock shot. It came flying out of the laurels, then another. They weren't aimed at us. They were landing around us, forming a rough circle. It's throwing rocks, James whispered. His face had gone pale. That's territorial behavior. It wants us to leave. More rocks came, bigger ones now. One bounced off the ground near my feet. I could see the thrower in my mind. Something strong enough to hurl stones the size of bowling balls. Something hiding in the thick vegetation, watching our every move. We should go, I said. But James was already unpacking his audio recorder. No, wait, this is incredible. If we can record the vocalizations. A rock the size of a melon crashed through the branches above us. It missed James's head by maybe 2 feet and slammed into the ground hard enough to make a crater. James, now! I grabbed his arm. That's when we heard it. The call, much louder than before, coming from multiple directions. Not just one voice. 3, maybe 4, all calling in a pattern. They were coordinating, communicating, surrounding us. Run, James said. We ran. Not down the trail, that was blocked by whatever was calling from that direction, but sideways, crashing through the laurel hells toward Cataract Falls. Branches whipped our faces, roots grabbed our feet. Behind us, the crashing got louder. They were following, herding us toward the cliff edge. I realized it too late. We broke through the laurels onto a rocky outcrop overlooking the waterfall. 80 feet down, water crashed over rocks. Behind us, the crashing sounds stopped. We were trapped. James bent over, gasping for breath. His face was bright red, sweat pouring down his neck. Liz, he managed to say. My chest. He collapsed before I could catch him. James! I knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. It was there, but racing, irregular. He clutched his left arm, his face twisted in pain. Heart attack. I grabbed my rod. Lio, this is Ranger Hawthorne, emergency. Officer down at Cataract Falls, heart attack, need immediate helicopter evac. Static answered me. Then a voice, broken and distant. Say, again, breaking up. I looked at my radio. The antenna was bent, the casing cracked. One of those rocks must have hit my pack, damaging the equipment. Repeat, emergency. I tried again. Officer, cardiac arrest, need... The radio went completely dead. I looked up at the tree line. Something moved there just beyond the laurels. Something massive, standing upright, watching us. I could see its outline against the bright flowers, broad shoulders, arms hanging below its knees, a head that came to a slight peak. Not human, not animal. Something else. James gasped beside me. His eyes were open but unfocused. Did you see it? He whispered. Don't talk, I said. Save your strength. 20 years, he managed. 20 years I've looked. And now... His eyes closed. James, stay with me. I started CPR, counting compressions, breathing into his mouth. 30 and 2, 30 and 2, over and over. The shape in the trees didn't move. It just stood there, watching me try to save my friend's life. I don't know how long I worked on him, long enough for my arms to go numb, for my back to scream in protest, long enough for the sun to move across the sky. But finally, I had to stop, had to accept what I already knew. James was dead. I sat back on my heels, tears running down my face. He was my mentor, my friend, and he'd died because we'd ignored the warnings, pushed into territory that wasn't meant for humans. I looked up at the tree line again. The shape was gone. But in the soft earth beside the rocks, there was a print. 18 inches long, 5 clear toes. And pressed into the mud next to it was a twisted branch arrangement, the same pattern as the structures we'd found. A signature, a claim. This was its territory, and we had trespassed. I used the emergency beacon in James's pack to call for helicopter rescue. It took them 4 hours to reach us. 4 hours. Sitting beside my friend's body, watching the tree line, knowing that something was out there. Watching. Waiting. When the helicopter finally came, I told them James had a heart attack while hiking. They didn't question it. Why would they? The truth was too impossible to believe. But as they loaded his body into the helicopter, I looked back at the forest one last time. In the shadow of the laurels, I saw it clearly for just a moment. 9 feet tall, covered in reddish-brown hair, arms as thick as tree trunks. Its eyes caught the sun, reflecting amber gold. Then it stepped back into the shadows and vanished like it had never been there at all. They gave me 3 days off for trauma counseling. I spent those days going through James's files, all the reports and photos he'd collected over 20 years. There were dozens of encounters, maybe hundreds, rangers who'd seen things, heard things, found evidence, all of it quietly filed away and forgotten. At the bottom of the last file, I found a letter. James had written it but never sent it. It was addressed to the park superintendent. I believe there is an unknown hominid species living in the Great Smoky Mountains. The evidence is overwhelming. But I also believe that documenting this species publicly would lead to its destruction. Humans would flood these mountains, trying to capture it, study it, exploit it. The creature seems to understand this. It avoids cameras, destroys evidence, and only shows itself to people who are alone, people who won't be believed. Maybe that's mercy. Maybe it's giving us a choice, to respect the wilderness and its secrets, or to destroy everything trying to prove we're right. I've decided to keep these files private. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share. The letter was dated a week before James died. I sat in my empty apartment staring at those words. James had died trying to docuse, meant this creature. He'd spent 20 years collecting evidence, and in the end, he'd decided the truth should stay hidden. But his death had made him ignore his own wisdom. We'd both wanted proof so badly that we'd pushed too far. On the 4th day, I went back to the mountains. I went alone. I took no camera, no recorder, no radio. Just water, a compass, and a backpack. The Park Service hadn't cleared me for duty yet, but I didn't care. I needed to go back. needed to understand. I hiked straight to the spot where James died, the cliff edge at Cataract Falls. Someone had cleared away the markers from the helicopter rescue, but I could still see where they'd landed, the trampled grass and broken branches. I sat down on the rocks and waited. The sun moved across the sky. Birds sang in the distance. They'd come back now that the helicopters were gone. Water crashed over the falls below me. It was peaceful, beautiful, the kind of place that made you understand why people used to believe in forest spirits. At sunset, I heard the footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, coming up the trail behind me, not trying to be quiet now. I didn't turn around. My heart pounded, but I kept my hands visible, non-threatening, showing I was unarmed. The footsteps stopped maybe 20 feet behind me. I could hear breathing, deep and slow. Could smell that wild musk again. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said quietly. "I'm not here to document you or prove you exist. I just want to understand." Silence. Then a sound, not quite words, but something like them. A low rumble that had patterns in it, inflections. It was trying to communicate. I slowly reached into my pack and pulled out James's file. All those photos, all that evidence. 20 years of secrets. I held it up so the creature could see. "He died trying to prove you're real," I said. "My friend. He spent his whole life looking for you." More of those rumbling sounds. Questioning, maybe. Or angry. "I could take this public," I continued. "I could show the world. Scientists would come, hunters, reporters. They'd tear this for a moa, just apart, trying to find you." I paused. "Or I can keep your secret, like the Cherokee did, like James tried to." I stood up slowly, still not turning around. The breathing behind me got faster, more agitated. "But I need to know something first," I said. "I need to know if you killed him, if you're dangerous, if people should be warned." A long silence, then footsteps, coming closer. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I held still. The footsteps moved around me in a wide circle, staying out of my direct sight, playing with me maybe, or trying to see if I'd panic. I didn't. Finally, it moved to where I could see it. 9.5 feet tall, at least, covered in thick reddish-brown hair except for the face, which was dark and leathery. The eyes were the most striking thing, deeply intelligent, amber-colored, watching me with something that looked almost human. Curiosity, assessment. Its shoulders were broader than any man's, arms hanging down past its knees, hands that could probably crush my skull without effort. But it wasn't threatening me. It was just looking. We stood there for a long moment, human and something not human, studying each other. Then it made a gesture. Its hand moved to its own chest, then out toward the mountains, then made a pushing motion toward me. The meaning was clear. "This is mine. Leave." "I understand," I said. "This is your home. We invaded it." It tilted its head, considering. Then it pointed at James's file in my hand. It made a motion like tearing something. It wanted me to destroy the evidence. "If I do this," I said carefully, "you have to promise something. You don't hurt anyone unless they threaten you. You let people hike these trails safely. This is a national park. It belongs to everyone, not just you." The creature huffed, something between a laugh and a warning. It pointed at me, then at the forest around us, and then made a cradling motion, like holding something precious. I understood then. It wasn't claiming ownership of the forest. It was protecting it. From us. From the damage humans do when we think we own something. "You're the guardian," I whispered, like the Cherokee said. It nodded. Actually nodded, like it understood English perfectly. Maybe it did. Maybe it had been listening to humans for centuries, learning our language, understanding our intentions. I looked down at James's file. 20 years of work. Proof that would make both our careers. Evidence that would rewrite textbooks, win awards, secure funding for research. I walked to the cliff edge and threw it over. The papers scattered in the wind, fluttering down toward the waterfall like white birds. Photos, notes, documentation, all of it gone, lost in the spray and currents below. When I turned back, the creature was closer, close enough to touch. It reached out one massive hand and gently, impossibly gently, touched my shoulder. Just for a second. The touch was warm, and I felt something in it. Gratitude, maybe, or respect. Then it turned and walked back into the laurels. Within seconds, it had vanished completely, like it had never been there at all. I stood alone on that cliff as the sun set, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle onto my shoulders. I'd destroyed evidence of the greatest zoological discovery in human history. I'd betrayed my scientific training, my education, everything I'd worked for. But I'd kept a promise, to James, and to something far older than humanity. Some secrets need to stay secret. Some wild things need to stay wild. I submitted my resignation 2 weeks later. The Park Service tried to convince me to stay, but I couldn't. Every time I looked at those mountains, I thought of James. I thought of that moment on the cliff, watching proof of everything flutter away into the waterfall spray. I took a job with a wilderness preservation nonprofit instead. No field work now, just legal advocacy, fighting to protect wild places from development and exploitation. It's the same as being in the forest, but it feels right. It feels like honoring the promise I made. I still hike sometimes, in different mountains, different forests. I keep my eyes open, looking for signs, unusual structures, massive footprints, areas where the wildlife goes suddenly quiet. I've found things in other places, little hints that maybe the Smokies aren't the only home for something we don't understand. I never photograph them, never document them. I just keep hiking. People ask me sometimes why I left the Park Service. I tell them I got burned out, needed a change. They accept that answer. It's easier than the truth, easier than trying to explain what I saw, what I lost, what I chose to protect. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that creature standing in the laurels, those amber eyes watching me, that gentle touch on my shoulder before it disappeared forever. I think about all the rangers who've seen things over the years, who've kept quiet because they know some knowledge is too dangerous. We're all carrying these secrets, scattered across parks and forests all over the country, a silent network of people who've glimpsed something impossible and chosen to look away. The Cherokee were right. There are guardians in the deep forests. They've been there longer than us, and they'll be there long after we're gone. They don't want our recognition or our protection. They just want us to leave some places alone, to remember that we don't own everything, don't need to document everything, don't have the right to expose every secret the world holds. James understood that in the end. That's why he wrote that letter. That's why he kept those files hidden for so long. He knew that some truths, once revealed, can't be taken back, and the cost of revealing them is higher than any benefit they might bring. I carry his lesson with me every day. Sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I hear that call echoing in my memory, that deep, resonant sound that vibrated in my chest. It sounded almost like a language, almost like words. Maybe it was saying thank you. Maybe it was saying goodbye. Or maybe it was saying what I've come to believe in my bones. The wild places are not ours to take. They're ours to protect, even from ourselves, especially from ourselves. I hope you understand why I'm sharing this story now, years later, with the names changed and the exact locations hidden. I'm breaking my own rule, I know, but there's a developer trying to build a resort near Cataract Falls. They're pushing for approval, arguing that section of the park is underutilized. Wasted. They need to know it's not wasted. They need to know something lives there, something that deserves to be left alone. I can't prove it. All the evidence is gone. But maybe this story will be enough. Maybe someone will read this and understand that some places need to stay wild, need to stay secret, because the forest has guardians, and they're watching, always watching to see what we'll choose. I chose to walk away, to keep the secret, to protect what shouldn't be exposed. I hope you'll make the same choice. My name is William Cragmore, and for 21 years I've walked every inch of the Ouachita National Forest in Arkansas. I'm a ranger, specifically assigned to the Caddo River Valley near the Oklahoma border. My job is tracking large mammals, mostly black bears, and keeping an eye on the backcountry where most folks don't go. I've got a prosthetic left leg, courtesy of Vietnam. Lost the real one to a landmine in '71. Some people think that would slow me down out here, but honestly, it just made me more careful, more observant. You learn to watch where you step when you've already stepped wrong once. I'm 46 now, and I've seen a lot of strange things in these woods, but I never believed in monsters, not the Bigfoot kind anyway. Growing up in Arkansas, you hear all those fook monster stories, some hairy creature terrorizing folks down south. Always figured it was nonsense, tourist bait. I'd investigated maybe a dozen Bigfoot sightings over the years, and every single one turned out to be a hoax. Fake plaster footprints, blurry photos of guys in gorilla suits. Once, it was literally just a bear standing on its hind legs. So when Buck Patterson called me on that sweltering July morning in 1981, saying his logging crew had spotted something not right out by their work site, I already had my explanation ready. Probably teenagers messing around. Maybe a black bear got curious about their equipment. "Will, you gotta come see this," Buck said over the crackling radio. His voice had an edge I didn't recognize. Buck was a tough old bastard, ran logging crews for 30 years. Not much rattled him. "Something tore up our harvester last night. And I mean, tore it up." "Equipment malfunction?" I asked. "Maybe the hydraulics." "The whole damn thing is flipped over, Will. 12,000 pounds, on its side like a toy truck." I told him I'd be there in an hour. The drive out took me deep into territory where the forest gets really thick. This part of the Ouachitas doesn't see much human traffic. It's all limestone caves and creek systems, dense bottomland forest where the canopy blocks out most of the sun. The Choctaw used to hunt here back before white settlers came through. There's old stories about the place, but then again, old stories exist about every forest in America. When I pulled up to the logging site, I immediately understood why Buck sounded shaken. The tree harvester, a massive piece of machinery worth more than my house, was lying on its side like someone had just pushed it over. Not rolled, not tipped by accident. The whole thing had been lifted and dropped. Deep gouges ran along the metal cab, 4 parallel lines that looked almost like claw marks. But no bear in North America has claws that could score steel like that. "Where's Jimmy?" I asked. Jimmy Howell was the operator who'd been working the harvester. Buck looked at the ground. "We don't know. He's missing." That changed everything. A damaged machine was one thing. A missing person was a whole different situation. I spent the next hour documenting everything with my camera. The marks on the metal, the way the ground was disturbed around the overturned harvester. And then I found them. The footprints. They were in the soft mud near the creek about 20 yards from the harvester. At first I thought they had to be fake, someone playing a prank. But as I knelt down to examine them closer, my stomach went cold. The prints were 18 inches long, humanoid shape, 5 toes, a heel, an arch, but way too big. And when I looked closer with my magnifying glass, I could see something that made my hands shake. Dermal ridges, the same kind of fingerprint patterns you'd see on a human hand, but on the sole of a foot. You can't fake that, not easily. I made plaster casts anyway, following procedure. The whole time I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Special effects guys could do this kind of thing, right? But who would come all the way out, here to the middle of nowhere, just to fake Bigfoot prints and flip over a 12,000-pound machine? "You smell that?" Buck asked. I did. The whole area had this musky, rotten smell. Not like a dead animal. I knew that smell well enough. This was different, stronger. It made my eyes water. "What do you think it is?" Buck's foreman, a younger guy named Dale, looked pale. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm going to find out." As I packed up my gear, I noticed something else that bothered me. The forest was too quiet. It was mid-July. Should have been crickets, cicadas, birds everywhere. But I couldn't hear any of them, just the wind moving through the trees and the distant sound of the creek. Every animal in the area had gone somewhere else. I called in the state police to help search for Jimmy Howell, and I contacted Dr. Rebecca Hartwell at the University of Arkansas. Rebecca was an anthropologist I'd worked with before on a case involving Native American artifacts. If anyone could make sense of those footprints, it was her. While we waited for help to arrive, I did what I always did. I started tracking. The prints led away from the logging site, deeper into the forest where the trees grew so thick you needed a flashlight at noon. I followed them for maybe half a mile before they just stopped. Not like the creature had climbed a tree or jumped to rocks. They just ended in the middle of a game trail, like whatever made them had simply vanished. That night, I set up camp about a quarter mile from the logging site. Buck and his crew had all gone home. Nobody wanted to stay out there after dark. I didn't blame them, but somebody had to keep looking for Jimmy. I'd brought my Remington 700 with a night vision scope, my radio, which barely worked in these valleys anyway, and enough supplies to stay out for a few days if needed. My Vietnam gear had taught me to be red, for anything. Around midnight, I heard the first knock. It came from the west, a sharp crack like someone hitting a baseball bat against a tree. I'd heard bears do something similar, rubbing against bark, but this was different, louder, more deliberate. Then another knock answered from the south, then another from the east. They were communicating. I grabbed my rifle and scanned the tree line with the night vision scope, trying to keep my breathing steady. The green-tinted view showed me trees, shadows, underbrush, nothing moving. Then I saw the eyes. They were about 9 feet off the ground, watching me from behind a massive oak tree, glowing red in the infrared scope, like twin coals. Too high to be a bear, too far apart to be a deer. I stood up slowly, keeping the rifle ready. "I know you're there," I called out. My voice sounded small in the darkness. The eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. "I'm looking for someone, a man named Jimmy Howell. He worked the logging equipment. If you know where he is..." A sound cut me off. It started low, like a growl, but then rose into something else, almost like a scream, but deeper. It made every hair on my body stand up. The sound echoed through the valley, and I heard answering calls from at least 3 other directions. I was surrounded. My finger found the trigger, but I didn't fire. Something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the eyes watched, not with animal aggression, but with something more calculating, more aware. The eyes moved, disappeared behind the tree. I heard branches breaking, moving away, but impossibly quiet for something that size. Then silence. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat with my back against a tree, rifle across my lap, jumping at every sound until the sun came up. The next morning, Dr. Hartwell arrived with a team from the university. She was a short woman with gray hair pulled back in a beats, all business and sharp intelligence. "Show me the prints," she said. I took her to the casts I'd made. She examined them for almost an hour, taking measurements, photographs, making notes in her field journal. "These are real," she finally said. "Real fake or real real?" "Real real, Will. The dermal ridges alone would be almost impossible to fabricate. And look at this." She pointed to the depth of the impressions. Whatever made these weighed at least 600 pounds, probably more. The pressure distribution, the way the toes gripped the mud, this wasn't made by a human in a costume. "So, what made them?" She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I honestly don't know, but I'd like to collect those hair samples you found on the harvester." The hair samples were coarse and dark, almost black. Under her portable microscope, Rebecca studied them for a long time. "The structure is unusual," she said. "Definitely primate. But the DNA preliminary screening I'm running shows markers that don't match anything in our database. Not human, not any known ape. It's like looking at something that diverged from our evolutionary tree a very long time ago." "That's impossible," I said. "I know, but I'm looking at it anyway." That afternoon, the state police found Jimmy Howell. He was 20 feet up in a sycamore tree, unconscious but alive. No visible injuries, but he wouldn't wake up. They had to bring in climbing gear to get him down. When the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, I got a closer look. His arms and chest were covered in strange marks. Not cuts exactly, but scratches arranged in patterns. Deliberate patterns, like symbols or letters in a language I didn't recognize. "What the hell did that?" one of the state troopers asked. I didn't have an answer. That night, Buck called me. Another crew had been working a site about 5 miles north. Their equipment had been destroyed too. Bulldozer overturned, chains snapped like they were made of paper. "Nobody was hurt this time," Buck said. "But Will, I'm pulling Well, my crew's out. Whatever's out there, it doesn't want us there, and I'm not risking my people's lives for timber." After he hung up, I sat in my cabin trying to make sense of everything. I'd been trained as a scientist. I believed in evidence, in rational explanations. But the evidence I had didn't fit any rational explanation. Something intelligent lived in these woods. Something big enough and strong enough to flip vehicles. Something that could communicate, coordinate, mark its territory. Something that had been here long before we arrived and didn't want us anymore. Over the next week, the situation got worse. Dr. Hartwell's DNA analysis came back from the university lab. The results made no sense. The hair samples showed primate characteristics, close to human actually, but with genetic markers that suggested the species had diverged from our lineage millions of years ago. One of her colleagues suggested it might be evidence of a relict population, a species everyone thought was extinct, somehow surviving in isolated pockets. "Like a coelacanth," she explained over the phone. "A living fossil." "What species are we talking about?" "The closest match in the genetic database is Gigantopithecus, a giant ape that went extinct 300,000 years ago in Asia, except this genetic material is from Arkansas, and it's clearly not extinct." I thought about the red eyes watching me from the darkness, the way the creature had moved, silent, intelligent, aware. "Rebecca, if these things are real, how many are we talking about?" Based on the territorial range they seem to be claiming and the patterns of tree structures I've been finding, I'd estimate a family group, maybe 6 to 10 individuals. "Family group," I repeated. That changed the equation. These weren't monsters. They were something else. Something that lived and raised young and defended territory. Something that had been here first. I contacted old Pete Weatherby, a local tracker who'd lived in these mountains his whole life. Pete was Choctaw, pushing 80, but he could still track a deer through solid rock. If anyone knew the old stories about these woods, it was him. We met at a diner in town, and I showed him photos of the footprints and the tree structures we'd been finding, large branches woven together 15 feet above ground, forming crude shelters or markers. Pete studied them for a long time, his weathered face unreadable. "My grandfather told me about the tall, hairy ones," he finally said. "The Nalusophilia. That's what the old Choctaw called them. Said they lived in the deep forest, protected the sacred places, usually avoided people. But when the lumber companies came in the 1800s, started tearing up the mountains, the Nalusophilia started fighting back." "What happened?" "The lumber companies won. They always do. The Nalusophilia went deeper into the mountains, into places so remote even we didn't go there. Most people figured they died out or maybe never existed to begin with." He pushed the photos back across the table. "But my grandfather said he saw one once when he was young, out hunting near the caves. Said it watched him for maybe 10 minutes, then just melted back into the forest. He never went back to that area." "The caves," I said. "The logging companies are working near the cave systems, aren't they?" Pete nodded. "Cut off the migration route between the summer territory and winter territory. If these creatures are real, and they're still following the old patterns my grandfather talked about, you've basically trapped them. They can't get to their winter range without crossing through the logging operations." That explained the attacks. These weren't monsters hunting humans. They were intelligent beings trying to protect their territory, their migration routes, maybe their families. The next incident happened 3 days later. Buck Patterson's brother-in-law, a guy named Marcus, had decided to go fishing at one of the remote lakes in the valley. He'd ignored all the warnings, figured the whole thing was overblown. They found his boat the next morning, moved half a mile up the shoreline from where he'd anchored it. His fishing gear was neatly arranged on the shore in a perfect circle. His boots were placed side by side at the water's edge. Marcus was gone. I organized a search party, bringing in trained dogs and volunteers. We found him 6 hours later, unharmed but terrified, huddled in a limestone cave about 2 miles from the lake. "It carried me," he kept saying over and over. "It picked me up like I weighed nothing and carried me through the forest. I could feel its arms around me, so strong, and it smelled like rotting leaves and wet fur. It put me in the cave and left food, berries and fish, then just left." "Did you see it?" I asked. "Just the shape. It was dark, but it was huge, at least 8 or 9 feet tall. It didn't hurt me. It just moved me, like it was showing me something." The psychologist who evaluated Marcus said he was in shock, but not lying. Whatever he'd experienced, it had really happened. That night, I went back to my cabin and found something on my front porch. It was an arrangement of stones and bones, animal bones, nothing human, laid out in a careful pattern. In the center was a bear skull, bleached white by time. Around it, river stones were placed in a circle. It was clearly deliberate. A message. I took photos, but I didn't disturb it. Instead, I sat on my porch and waited. The knocking started around 2 a.m., closer this time, maybe 50 yards into the trees. 3 sharp raps, pause, 3 more raps. I stood up, leaving my rifle inside. Something told me this wasn't a moment for weapons. "I hear you," I called into the darkness. The knocking stopped. Then I heard movement. Branches shifting. Footsteps so heavy I could feel them through the porch boa. RDS. And then I saw it. The creature stepped into the moonlight about 30 yards from my cabin. It stood at least 9 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown fur. The shoulders were impossibly broad, the arms hanging past its knees. But it was the face that froze me in place. The face was wrong for an ape, too flat. The eyes caught the moonlight and reflected it back. Intelligent eyes that studied me with clear purpose. It stood completely still, watching me the same way I was watching it. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute. Then it made a sound, low and rumbling, almost like speech, but not quite. It gestured with one massive hand toward the woods, then back at the arrangement on my porch. Another gesture, more emphatic. It was trying to communicate. "I understand," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't want the logging. You want us to leave." The creature tilted its head as if considering my words. Then it made another gesture, pointing at me specifically, then at the arrangement, then at the forest. A choice. It was offering me a choice. Before I could respond, it turned and vanished into the darkness, moving with impossible silence for something so large. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I sat on my porch and tried to understand what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't a mindless monster. This was an intelligent being, capable of communication, making deliberate decisions about how to interact with humans. And I'd spent 21 years in these woods, never knowing it was there. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with Buck Patterson, Dr. Hartwell, Pete Weatherby, and anyone else who'd seen evidence of the creatures. We met at the ranger station, and I laid out everything I knew. "These aren't animals attacking randomly," I said. "They're defending territory, and based on Pete's information, the logging operations have cut off their migration route. We've basically trapped them." "So what do you suggest?" Buck asked. "We stop logging?" "You know what that means for the local economy." "I know what it means. But Buck, these things are real. They're intelligent. And if we keep pushing into their territory, someone's going to die." Dr. Hartwell pulled out maps of the area, marking the locations of all the incidents, the cave systems, and the old Choctaw territory markers Pete had identified. "Look at the pattern," she said. "Every attack has been near these cave systems. If we could establish a protected corridor here," she traced a line with her finger, It would give them access to both seasonal territories without crossing through the logging sites. That's a lot of timber we're talking about leaving alone, Buck said. It's also a lot of lives, I replied. We spent hours debating, planning. Pete brought in a Choctaw elder named Thomas Little Creek, who knew the old stories and the traditional ways of negotiating territory with the Nalusa Falaya. According to him, it was possible to establish peaceful boundaries if done with proper respect. They're not monsters, Thomas explained. They're guardians of the old places. If you show respect, leave offerings, acknowledge their right to the land, they'll accept coexistence. But you have to mean it. They can tell the difference. We developed a plan. We'd enter the disputed territory at dawn, carrying traditional peace offerings, local plants, tobacco, arrangements of stones, no weapons. We'd attempt to establish communication and propose the corridor solution. It was completely insane. But it was also the only option that didn't involve killing potentially the last members of an undocumented primate species. The night before we were supposed to make contact, I had a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream, I've never been sure. I was standing in a clearing deep in the forest. Around me stood 6 of the creatures, the tall, hairy ones, the Nalusa Falaya. The largest one, the alpha male I'd seen at my cabin, stepped forward. In the dream, I could understand him somehow, though he didn't speak in any language I recognized. "You are the one who understands," he seemed to say. "Will you protect the old ways?" "I'll try," I answered in the dream. The alpha placed one massive hand on my shoulder. The weight of it was enormous, but somehow gentle. "The others come with fire. Choose." I woke up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat. At dawn, our small team, me, Dr. Hartwell, Pete, and Thomas Little Creek, entered the forest carrying our offerings. We moved slowly, making plenty of noise so we wouldn't startle anyone or anything. Pete led us to a natural clearing near the main cave system, a place he said was traditionally used for Choctaw councils. We arranged our offerings in the center of the clearing and waited. They came after about an hour. I'd seen one up close, but seeing 6 together was overwhelming. The alpha male stood in front, flanked by 2 others nearly as large. Behind them were 3 smaller individuals, females maybe, and what looked like a juvenile. They formed a defensive semicircle, watching us with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Thomas stepped forward, speaking in Choctaw and using traditional hand gestures. I didn't understand all the words, but I caught the meaning. Respect, territory, coexistence, promise. The alpha listened. Then he responded, a series of sounds and gestures that Thomas seemed to understand. They went back and forth like this for several minutes, an ancient form of negotiation I was only beginning to comprehend. Then we heard the trucks. Buck's logging crew, the ones we'd specifically told to stay away, came roaring up the access road. Later I'd find out that some of the crew had gotten drunk and decided to go hunt Bigfoot. They'd brought rifles, spotlights, and way too much courage. The alpha creature heard them coming and immediately moved his family behind him, a protective stance I recognized from my military training. The other adults formed a defensive perimeter. "Get back to the trucks," I shouted at the approaching crew. "Get out of Boo. Here!" But they'd already seen the creatures. Someone screamed. Someone else fired a shot. The bullet hit the alpha in the shoulder. He roared, a sound so loud and primal it shook the leaves from the trees. The other creatures roared in response, a coordinated display of dominance and warning. The loggers panicked and fired more shots. One hit the female, another hit the juvenile. Everything exploded into chaos. The creatures charged, not running away but attacking to protect their wounded. I saw one of the males lift a logger off his feet and throw him 20 yards into a tree. Another swung a massive arm and sent a rifle flying like a toy. "Stop!" I was screaming, but nobody could hear me over the gunfire and roaring. I made a decision. Maybe the wrong decision. Maybe the right one. I still don't know. I grabbed Buck's rifle and fired 3 shots into the ground in front of the loggers, forcing them to stop shooting and pay attention. Then I turned and fired 3 more shots into the air, a signal to the creatures. "I'm on your side," I shouted. "Let them go! Let them go!" The alpha creature locked eyes with me. Blood was streaming from his shoulder wound. His family was behind him, hurt and terrified. He had every reason to kill everyone in that clearing. But he stopped. He made a sound, low and rumbling, and the other creatures stopped their attack. They gathered around their wounded, forming a protective circle. I turned to the loggers. "Get out, now." They didn't need to be told twice. They ran for their trucks, leaving their weapons behind. When the sound of the engines faded, I turned back to the creatures. The Alpha was still watching me. Blood dripped from his shoulder onto the ground. "I'm sorry," I said. I don't know if he understood the words, but I meant them with everything I had. The Alpha made a sound, softer this time. Then he gestured with one massive hand. Not threatening, not aggressive. A farewell. The family group moved back into the forest, supporting their wounded. The juvenile turned to look back at us once, its eyes full of what looked like sadness or maybe confusion. Then they were gone, melting into the deep woods like shadows. Thomas was crying. Dr. Hartwell stood frozen, her scientific notepad forgotten in her hand. Pete just nodded slowly, like this was exactly what he'd expected. "We failed," I said. "No," Thomas replied. "We tried. That matters." The official report listed the incident as industrial sabotage with mass panic event. Nobody mentioned the creatures. Nobody talked about what really happened. The logging company abandoned their contracts in the area, citing safety concerns and equipment losses. The Arkansas Game Fish Commission, under pressure I applied through every channel I had, designated the cave system area as protected watershed. No commercial logging allowed. Jimmy Howell eventually woke up from his catatonic state. He didn't remember much, just being carried through the forest by something huge and gentle, being placed in the tree canopy where he'd be safe from predators. The marks on his skin faded after a few weeks. Dr. Hartwell published a paper on the hair samples, framing them as unidentified primate genetic material requiring further study. The academic community mostly ignored it. Sometimes the truth is too strange for people to accept. I stayed on as a ranger, but my job changed. I became the unofficial protector of that territory. Whenever hikers reported planning to explore the cave systems, I'd steer them somewhere else. Whenever I heard rumors of new logging operations, I'd find reasons they couldn't go through. It became my mission to make sure what happened that day never happened again. Sometimes, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, I find arrangements on my porch, bones and stones in careful patterns, messages from the forest. I always leave tobacco and local berries in response, the way Thomas taught me. On quiet nights when I'm out on patrol, I sometimes hear the wood knocking, distant, echoing through the valleys. They're still out there, still moving between their territories, following patterns older than human memory. Last month, a hiker showed me a photo she'd taken near the Oklahoma border. In the background, barely visible between the trees, was a tall figure covered in reddish-brown fur. It was blurry, unclear, probably would be dismissed as a hoax or misidentification. But I looked at those eyes in the photo, and I knew. They're still there, still watching, still guarding the old places. I'm 57 now, considering retirement, but I can't leave. Not yet. Because someone has to remember what really happened in these woods. Someone has to stand between two worlds. The human world that wants to pave and develop everything, and the older world that's been here longer than we can imagine. I tell you this story not to scare you, but to make you think. When you're out in the deep forests, the real backcountry where cell phones don't work and the trails fade away, remember that you're not alone. You're not always the apex predator. And the things watching you from the shadows might be more aware, more intelligent, more deserving of respect than you ever imagined. The Fook monster was never just a legend. It was a memory of something real, something ancient, something that has as much right to these mountains as we do, maybe more. And they're still here, in the deep places where the maps have blank spaces and the compass spins in circles. They're still here, hoping we'll finally learn to share the world we've claimed as our own. I hope we do, because next time, we might not get another chance. My name is Thomas Grimsby, but everyone calls me Tom. I've been a ranger at Jefferson National Forest for 17 years now, and in all that time, I never believed in the ghost stories. You grow up in these Appalachian mountains, you hear all kinds of tales, spirits in the hollows, haints in the hills, old miners who never left their tunnels. My grandpa told those stories. So did his father before him. I always figured they were just making things up to scare kids away from dangerous old mine shafts. I was wrong about that. It was late September of 1976 when everything changed. The mornings had started getting cold, and that thick autumn fog would roll into the valleys every night, hanging there until noon. I remember thinking it was beautiful that year, the way the mist would catch in the trees, turning everything soft and quiet. I was 41 years old, married to Linda for 15 years, no kids, third generation born in these mountains. I knew every trail, every cave system, every place where hikers got themselves lost or hurt. I'd saved more than 40 people in my time as a ranger. Pull someone out of a ravine, you feel good about yourself. Find a lost kid before dark. Their parents cry and hug you. It's honest work, and I was proud of it. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. A geological survey team hadn't checked in for 3 days. They'd been mapping cave systems up on Devil's Backbone Ridge, way out in the peaks of Otter Wilderness. That's about 35 miles from the nearest paved road, real backcountry. No cell towers out there, no radio signal either if you get down in the valleys. Probably just lost track of time, my supervisor said. But with the storms coming in, we better make sure they're okay. I packed my gear, radio, compass, first aid kit, enough food and water for 2 days. My German shepherd, Rex, was getting old, but he still loved a geese. Food search. We headed out before sunrise, driving as far as the logging roads would take us, then hiking the rest. The woods felt wrong from the start. I noticed it maybe 2 miles in. Rex noticed it first. He kept stopping, ears up, head turning like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. But there wasn't anything to hear. That was the problem. No birds singing, no squirrels rustling in the leaves, no wind moving through the trees. Just this heavy, pressing silence that made my ears ring. "Come on, boy," I said, trying to sound normal. "We got people to find." The survey team's base camp was supposed to be near an old mining hollow called Devil's Backbone. Stupid name, but then again, half the places in these mountains have stupid names. This particular hollow had a bad history. Back in 1890, there was a mining accident. Cave-in killed 23 men, sealed them right up in the mountain. My grandpa said it wasn't really an accident, that the mine owner did it on purpose over some kind of labor dispute, but who knows? Old mountain stories get twisted around. We found their camp around noon, 3 tents, all still standing. Coleman stove sitting out with a pot of something that had gone to mold. Sleeping bags laid out neat and tidy. But no people. And their equipment. That's what made my skin crawl. All their surveying tools, their cameras, their notebooks, everything was arranged in a perfect circle in the middle of the clearing. Not scattered like you'd expect if someone left in a hurry. Arranged, like someone had carefully placed each item exactly where they wanted it. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat, like the air was too thick to carry it properly. "This is Ranger Grimsby with the Forest Service. Anyone here?" Nothing. Rex whined and pressed against my leg. He didn't want to be there. Smart dog. I radioed back to base. "Found their camp. Nobody. Here. Equipment's been moved around. Looks strange." Static crackled back at me. "Find bodies?" "No bodies. No sign of struggle. Just weird. I'm going to look around." "Careful. Storms. Tonight." The radio cut out completely. I tried it a few more times, but got nothing but dead air. Could have been the limestone caves. They play hell with radio signals. Could have been the storms coming in. Could have been something else. I decided to search the area in a grid pattern, standard procedure. That's when I noticed my compass was spinning. Not just drifting, spinning in slow circles like it couldn't figure out which way was north. I tapped it, shook it, held it level. Didn't matter, just kept spinning. "Magnetic ore deposits," I muttered. "That's all it is." But I didn't believe it. Not really. Because the temperature was dropping, and it shouldn't have been. It was September. middle of the day, and I could see my breath. Rex's breath, too, coming out in little white puffs. That's when I saw the first cairn. A cairn is a pile of rocks, usually built as a trail marker or memorial. This one was about 3 feet tall, made of smooth river stones that didn't belong anywhere near Devil's Backbone. We were miles from any river. The stones were stacked in a perfect spiral pattern, and they were covered in a thin layer of frost. I know every trail marker in this forest. I put up half of them myself. This cairn hadn't been there 3 days ago when I'd last patrolled this area. Stay close, Rex. We moved deeper into the hollow, following what looked like a game trail. Every 100 yards or so, I found another cairn. Same spiral pattern, same frost, same river stones that had no business being there. Someone, or something, had built these overnight. The trail led toward the old mine entrance. I'd been to this mine before, of course. It was sealed up back in 1890 with about 3 feet of concrete and an iron grate. Dangerous old place. Every few years, some idiot would try to break in looking for lost gold or whatever, but the seal was solely due. State Historical Society had reinforced it in the 60s, except now there were pickaxe marks in the concrete. Fresh ones. Deep gouges, like someone had been trying to break through, and the ground around the entrance had been excavated, big piles of dirt and rock that definitely hadn't been there before. But here's the thing that made my hands start shaking. There were no tool marks in the dirt, no shovel scrapes, no footprints. The earth looked like it had just moved itself, piled itself up in neat mounds. I found the first blood trail leading away from the mine. Not a lot of blood, just drops here and there, dark and old. I followed it for maybe 50 yards before it stopped at a fallen log. Behind the log, half buried in leaves, I found a notebook. The cover said, "Survey Log, Day 6, in neat handwriting. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. The first few pages were normal geological notes: limestone composition, water table depth, cave system mapping. But then the handwriting started getting messier, more frantic. Day 7, strange sounds from the sealed mine, like picks hitting rock. But there's 3 feet of concrete. Nobody could be in there. Day 8. All our equipment moved during the night. We didn't hear anything. Jenkins says he saw someone watching from the trees, wearing old-fashioned clothes. When he called out, the figure walked straight into a tree trunk and vanished. Day 9. The sounds are getting louder, and there are voices. 20, maybe 30 different voices, all calling out together. They're saying, "Help us." The temperature drops every time we hear them. Martinez won't stop shaking. We need to leave, but the trail markers are gone. Every one of them. We keep walking in circles. Day 10. They're digging themselves out. We can hear it. The concrete is cracking. There are eyes in the dark watching us. So many eyes. They want us to know something. They want us to tell someone. But we can't understand. We can't. The entry cut off mid-sentence. The rest of the pages were blank except for one final line written in what looked like a different handwriting entirely. 23 of us. Remember 23. Rex started barking. I looked up from the notebook and saw them. At first, I thought they were just shadows between the trees, dark shapes that didn't quite match the afternoon light. But then one of them moved, and I saw the flicker of a candle flame on top of a mining helmet. Then another, 23 lights, all in a row, deep in the woods, where no lights should be. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. "Forest Service. Identify yourselves." The lights didn't move. They just stood there, bobbing slightly like men swaying in place. And now I could hear it, the sound of picks hitting stone, echoing from the sealed mine. Rhythmic, steady. The sound of men working deep underground. Rex bolted. I'm not ashamed to say I ran after him. A smart man knows when to leave. Whatever those lights were, whatever was making that sound, It wasn't natural, and it wasn't friendly. I crashed through the underbrush, following Rex's white tail, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I made it maybe 200 yards before I realized I couldn't hear my own footsteps. The forest had gone completely silent again. No leaves crunching, no branches breaking, nothing. I was running, but the world was quiet as a tomb. And then I ran straight into someone. We both fell hard. I scrambled backward, reaching for the radio on my belt, and found myself looking at Jake Holbrook. Jake was another ranger, younger than me, worked the southern sections. Good guy, level-headed. "Jesus, Tom," he gasped. "What the hell are you doing out here?" "Search and rescue," I panted. "Missing survey team. What are you doing here?" "Got a call that you hadn't radioed in for 6 hours. They sent me to check on you." He stood up, brushing leaves off his jacket. "Your wife's worried sick." 6 hours? I looked at my watch. It said 6:47 p.m., but that couldn't be right. I'd found the camp at noon. I'd only been in the hollow for maybe an hour. "My watch must be broken," I said. "Mine says the same thing." Jake's face was pale. "Tom, I've been looking for you since 3 o'clock. I've walked this same stretch of woods 5 times. Every time I think I'm headed back to the trail, I end up right back here. It's like the forest is turned around." I showed him the notebook, watched his face go from confused to scared as he read it. "This is crazy," he said. "Survey teams don't just vanish. People don't vanish. Come on, I'll show you the camp." But when we tried to find our way back, we couldn't. Every direction looked the same. The cairns were still there, but now they seemed to be everywhere, dozens of them marking paths that went nowhere. And the temperature kept dropping. It was maybe 40 degrees now, way too cold for September. That's when we heard the voices. 23 men, singing in harmony. An old mining song my grandpa used to hum. Something about dark tunnels and the devil's pay. The voices came from all around us, echoing off the trees, impossible to locate. Jake's flashlight flickered and died. So did mine. Both fresh batteries. "We need to get out of here," Jake whispered. "Now." "I know. But which way?" The singing stopped. In the sudden silence, we heard footsteps. Not modern footsteps. These were heavy, dragging, like men in thick boots trudging through mud, getting closer, coming from every direction at once. And then we saw them properly for the first time. They weren't shadows anymore. They were men. 23 men in old mining clothes, canvas overalls, heavy boots, their faces black with coal dust. Each one wore a mining helmet with a candle that burned with a cold, blue-white flame. They didn't walk so much as glide, their feet not quite touching the groats, and moving through trees like the trunks weren't there. "Oh, God," Jake whispered. "Oh, God, Tom, what are they?" I couldn't answer, couldn't move. These men were dead. They'd been dead for 86 years, and they were walking toward us. The one in front stopped maybe 20 feet away. His face was wrong, sunken in places, like he'd been crushed by rocks. His eyes were hollow pits, but I could feel him looking at me anyway. His mouth moved. No sound came out at first, but then his voice filled the hollow, speaking in an old-fashioned mountain accent. "Remembering. Someone's got to do the remembering." What do you want?" I managed to say. All 23 spoke together then, their voices overlapping into one terrible chorus. Tell them what happened. Tell them we didn't die accidental. Tell them about Graves." The name hit me like a punch. Graves. Edmund Graves was the mine owner back in 1890. My grandfather had told me the story, how Graves had sealed up the mine during a labor dispute, trapping 23 miners inside because they'd tried to form a union. The official record said it was an accident, a natural cave-in, but the mountain people knew different. "I don't understand," I said. "What do you want me to do?" The spirits moved closer. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. I could see frost forming on Jake's jacket, on the trees around us, on my own hands. Justice, they said. Truth. Remembering. One of them reached out toward me. His hand was translucent, like smoke, but when his fingers touched my shoulder, I felt it. A cold so deep it burned. And suddenly, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in the mine. Dark. Can't breathe. The air's full of dust and the screams of dying men. The tunnel has collapsed and we're sealed in. We're digging, all of us digging with our bare hands. But the rocks won't move. Someone's crying for his wife. Someone else is praying. We're running out of air. Running out of time. And outside, on the surface, Edmund Graves is laughing. We can hear him through the rocks. Should have took your wages and been grateful, he shouts down to us. Should have kept your mouths shut about conditions. Now you'll keep 'em shut forever. We die slow. Takes 3 days. One by one, we run out of air and the mountain takes us. But we don't rest. Can't rest. Not until someone knows. Not until someone tells. I came back to myself gasping, tears freezing on my face. Jake was holding me up. I'd fallen to my knees without realizing it. Tom, snap out of it. They were murdered, I said. Edmund Graves murdered them. Sealed them in alive. Everyone thought it was an accident, but it wasn't. The spirits hadn't moved. They stood in their circle around us, waiting. The survey team, Jake said suddenly. Where are they? The spirits turned as one and pointed toward the sealed mine entrance. We didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at us to run the other way. But we went anyway, because what else could we do? These spirits had been waiting 86 years for someone to understand. Someone to help. The mine entrance looked different now. The concrete seal had a massive crack running through it, and through the crack I could see movement. Lights. Hello? I called. Survey team? Can you hear me? 3 voices answered, echoing up from deep underground. Help us. Please help us. They won't let us leave until someone knows. Until someone tells. Jake and I looked at each other. They're alive, he said. We have to get them out. But when we tried to pull at the concrete, our hands went numb with cold. The spirits didn't want us opening the mine. Not yet. Not until we understood everything. More visions hit me. This time I saw Edmund Graves himself. A fat man with a gray beard, counting money in a fine office while 23 families buried empty coffins. I saw his grandson opening a development company. Saw that company buying up old mining land all over these mountains, including this hollow. Saw plans to turn Devil's Backbone into a resort. They're going to build here, I said. The Graves family. They're going to build a resort right on top of the mine. Right on top of these men's graves. The spirits pressed closer. Frost covered everything now. The trees, the ground, us. My lungs burned with every breath. We'll tell, Jake said. His teeth were chattering. We'll tell everyone. Just please, let those people go. The spirits didn't move. They don't believe us, I realized. They've been trying to tell people for 86 years. Nobody ever listens. One of the spirits, the one who'd touched me, stepped forward. His hand reached out again, but this time toward Jake. Show them, the spirit said. Let them see. No, I shouted. Don't touch him. Too late. The spirit's hand passed through Jake's chest. Jake's eyes went wide. His body went rigid. And when he spoke, it wasn't his voice anymore. It was 23 voices layered together, speaking through his mouth. My name was Robert Chen. I was 32 years old. I had 3 daughters. My name was William Potter. I was 24. I was getting married in the spring. My name was Samuel Drake. I was 41. I just wanted fair wages. My name was... They kept going. All 23 names. All 23 lives. Jake's body shook with the effort of holding so many souls, and I could see it was killing him. Blood ran from his nose, his ears. His eyes rolled back. Stop, I screamed. You're hurting him. Someone must remember, the voices said through Jake. Someone must tell, or we take them all. The surveyors, your friend, you, we take you down into the dark where no one forgets." The ground beneath us started shaking. The crack in the concrete widened. From deep in the mine, I could hear grinding, cracking sounds, the mountain itself coming apart. "I'll do it," I shouted. "I'll tell everyone. I'll get proof. I'll expose the Graves family. Just let him go." The spirits considered this. 23 pairs of hollow eyes fixed on me. "Proof," they said. "Yes, the proof is in the dark. Will you go into the dark, Ranger? Will you go where we died?" I looked at the cracked mine entrance, at Jake, bleeding and shaking, at the spirits closing in. "Yes," I said. "I'll go." The spirits released Jake. He collapsed like a puppet with cut strings, and I barely caught him before his head hit a rock. He was breathing but unconscious, his skin ice cold. I dragged him away from the mine entrance and laid him against a tree, took off my jacket and covered him with it. "Hold on, buddy," I whispered. "I'll get us out of this." The spirits waited, silent, watching with their hollow eyes. I turned to face the mine entrance. The crack in the concrete had widened enough for a man to squeeze through. Inside was darkness so complete it seemed to swallow light. And from that darkness came the smell, stale air, coal dust, and something else. Death. 86 years of death. "I need light," I said. The lead spirit, the one who'd shown me his memories, moved forward. He pulled the mining helmet from his own ghostly head and held it out. The candle flame burned cold and blue, but it burned. I took the helmet. It felt like grabbing smoke, but it stayed solid in my hands. I put it on. The blue flame cast everything in strange shadows. "What am I looking for?" I asked. "Truth," the spirits answered. "Written truth. Graves kept records, wanted us to know why we died, left a ledger in his office. Office is still there, deep in the dark." I wanted to run. Every part of me screamed to run, but I looked at Jake, still unconscious, at the mine where 3 surveyors were trapped, at these 23 spirits who'd been waiting so long for justice. I squeezed through the crack in the concrete. The tunnel beyond was smaller than I expected. I had to hunch over to walk. The walls were wooden support beams, old and rotten, barely holding back tons of rock and earth. Every step I took, the wood groaned. Dust sifted down from above. The blue flame on my helmet showed pick marks in the walls, desperate, frantic marks where the miners had tried to dig themselves out. I could see scratches where fingernails had torn against stone. Further in, I found the first body. He was just bones now, still wearing the rotted remains of mining clothes. His hands were still raised, frozen in the moment of digging. I had to step over him. There were more beyond, bones scattered where men had fallen trying to reach the surface. 23 dead men in the dark, waiting, remembering. I found the office maybe 300 feet in. It was a small chamber cut into the rock, just big enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. Edmund Graves must have used it as his underground headquarters. The desk was still there, rotted and collapsed. The filing cabinet was rusted shut. It took me 10 minutes of pulling and prying before I got it open. Inside were old papers, most of them crumbled to nothing. But there, in the bottom drawer, was a leather-bound ledger. The cover said, "Devil's Backbone Mine, Private." I opened it with shaking hands. The entries were all there. Dates, names, wages, but also notes in Graves's handwriting. Workers becoming troublesome, demanding shorter hours and safety equipment. Refused to see reason. Chen, Potter, and Drake are ringleaders. Others will follow if not stopped. Solution: controlled collapse of main shaft. Will be ruled accident. Workers buried. Problem solved. Cheaper than paying demands. And then, dated September 17th, 1890. Deed done. 23 troublemakers sealed. Cost: 47 pounds of dynamite, 3 yards of concrete. Savings: $2,400 per year in wages. County sheriff agrees to rule it accidental collapse. Mine will be abandoned and sealed properly within the week. No one will ever know. I had it. Written confession to murder. Proof that could destroy the Graves family legacy, stop the resort development, finally give these men peace. But I still had to get out. I grabbed the ledger and had turned back toward the entrance. That's when I heard the grinding sound behind me. I spun around and saw rocks moving on their own, piling up, blocking the tunnel. No! I ran for the entrance, but rocks kept falling, the spirit's power collapsing the tunnel just like Graves had collapsed it 86 years ago. They were showing me, making me feel it, making me understand. I was going to die in the dark, just like they had. I ran harder, ducking under falling beams, jumping over piles of rock. The blue flame on my helmet flickered and nearly went out. Behind me, I could hear the mountain groaning, shifting, getting ready to swallow me whole. The entrance crack was shrinking. I could see it ahead, a thin line of gray daylight getting narrower and narrower. I dove for it. My shoulders scraped against concrete, rocks fell on my back, my legs. The ledger was clutched against my chest. I could taste dust and blood. The crack was too small now. I was stuck, and the mountain was closing like a fist. Hands grabbed my arms, living hands, warm and strong, pulling me through the crack just as it slammed shut behind me with a sound like thunder. I lay on the ground outside, gasping and bleeding. Jake was above me, along with 3 other people I didn't know. The surveyors, I realized. All of us were covered in frost and dirt and blood, but we were alive. The spirits stood in a circle around us, watching, waiting. I held up the ledger. I have it, I said. I have the proof. Written confession. Edmund Graves murdered you, all of you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows. The spirits didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly, they began to fade. The blue flames on their helmets flickered and went out, one by one. But before they vanished completely, the lead spirit, the one who'd helped me, spoke one final time. Remember us. Tell them we were human. Tell them we had names. I will, I promised. I swear it. The last spirit faded away. The unnatural cold lifted. Birds began to sing again in the trees. The forest felt alive again, normal again. We were alone. They found us 2 days later. Search and rescue, finally able to get through once the supernatural interference lifted. Jake was in bad shape. The possession had damaged something in his mind. He couldn't stop talking about the voices, the names, the faces of dead men. They took him to a hospital in Richmond. Last I heard, he never really recovered. He lives in a care facility now, still muttering those 23 names over and over. The 3 surveyors recovered better, but none of them ever went back to geology work. They'd spent 3 days trapped in that hollow, hearing the spirits, seeing things that couldn't be real, but were. One of them became a minister. Another moved to California and won't even hike anymore. Me? I took the ledger to every authority I could find. County sheriff, state police, historical society, newspapers. Most of them didn't want to hear it. The Graves family is rich and powerful. Edmund's great-grandson runs Graves Development Corporation, one of the biggest real estate companies in Virginia, but the proof was too solid to ignore. Written confession to murder. Names, dates, everything. The State Historical Commission launched an investigation. They excavated the mine, found all 23 bodies still there, right where they'd died. Forensic evidence matched my story. The collapse was deliberately caused by explosives, not an accident. The Graves family tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. The resort development was canceled. The hollow was declared a historical site and permanently protected. They built a memorial there now, a simple stone marker with 23 names carved into it. Robert Chen, William Potter, Samuel Drake, and 20 more. Here lie 23 miners, murdered September 17, 1890. They demanded fair wages and safe conditions. They were silenced, but not forgotten. I visit sometimes. The hollow feel is peaceful now. Quiet in a normal way, not that pressing, wrong silence. Birds sing, squirrels run through the trees. It's just a forest again. But I'm different now. Ever since I wore that spirit helmet, ever since they touched me, I can see things other people can't. Not just in Devil's Backbone, everywhere in these mountains. There are spirits all over Appalachia, miners who died in cave-ins, loggers killed by falling trees, Cherokee families who were marched away on the Trail of Tears and never came home. They all want the same thing those 23 miners wanted: to be remembered, to have their stories told, to be known as human beings who lived and died and mattered. My wife left me, said I'd changed, that I scared her with my talk of ghosts and duties to the dead. Maybe I did change. Maybe that's the price of truth. I'm not a ranger anymore. I work for the State Historical Commission now, documenting forgotten stories across the Appalachians. Every old mine, every abandoned town, every place where people died and were forgotten. I go there. I listen. I remember. Because here's what I learned in that hollow. The worst thing you can do to someone isn't killing them. It's erasing them, making it like they never existed. 23 men died in the dark, and for 86 years the world pretended it was just an accident. Nobody's fault, nothing to be done. But they weren't forgotten. They remembered themselves, and they made damn sure someone else would remember too. So if you're ever hiking in the Appalachian Mountains and you find a place that feels wrong, too quiet, too cold, too watched, don't ignore it. There might be someone there who needs to be heard, someone who died unfairly and wants nothing more than for their story to be told. Listen to them, remember them, tell their story. It's the least we can do for the dead. And sometimes, late at night, when the fog rolls into the valleys, I still hear them singing. 23 voices in harmony, that old mining song about dark tunnels and the devil's pay. But it doesn't sound sad anymore. It sounds peaceful. They rest now. Finally, after so long, they rest. But there are others who don't. So many others. And I hear them calling out there in the dark hollows and forgotten places, waiting for someone to remember. Someone's got to do the remembering. I guess that someone is me. My name is Marcus Ironside, and I've been a ranger in the Nantahala National Forest for 13 years. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Poachers, lost hikers, problem bears, even a few meth labs tucked into forgotten hollows. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened in the fall of 1987. I need to tell you this story because people deserve to know what's really out there in those mountains, not the sanitized version the Park Service fed to the newspapers. The truth. My mama was Cherokee, my daddy Scots-Irish. Growing up, I heard all the old stories, shapeshifters, little people, spirits that guarded sacred places. I loved those tales, but I never believed them. Not really. When Grandma talked about the blood drinker that lived in the high caves, I figured it was just something to keep kids from wandering off. I should have listened better. The Cherahalla Skyway area where I patrol is some of the most remote country in North Carolina. We're talking mountain valleys so deep that radio signals can't reach in, roads that become impassable with the first snow, places where you can walk for days without seeing another human soul. It's beautiful up there, especially in autumn when the leaves turn and the air gets that crisp bite to it. But it's also isolated in a way that city folks can't quite understand. That October, I was running night patrols during hunting season. My specialty was predator control, tracking problem animals, investigating livestock kills, that sort of thing. I'd handled dozens of cases over the years. Coyotes mostly, sometimes a black bear that got too comfortable around farms. I knew how to read a kill site, how to tell what animal made which tracks, how predators fed. Or at least I thought I did. The first call came in on October 15th from a farmer named Bill Henderson. He ran cattle on property that BGUM ordered the National Forest, up near the Tennessee line. His voice on the radio was shaky, which wasn't like Bill. He was a tough old guy, ran his farm alone after his wife passed. "Marcus, you need to get up here," he said. "Something got into my cattle." "How many head did you lose?" "3. But Marcus, it ain't like nothing I ever seen before." I loaded my gear into the truck, my Ruger rifle, spotlight, camera, evidence kit, standard procedure. I figured it was probably coyotes, maybe a mountain lion if we were unlucky. We hadn't had a confirmed mountain lion sighting in years, but they were starting to drift back into the region. The drive up to Bill's place took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. The sun was setting, painting the ridge lines orange and red. Beautiful, but I've learned that mountains can be beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Bill met me at his barn. He looked pale, and his hands were shaking as he lit a cigarette. "They're in the far pasture," he said. "I ain't been back since I found them this morning. Something about it just ain't right." We took his four-wheeler across his property. The pasture sat in a little valley, surrounded by thick forest on three sides. The cattle were usually brought in at night, but these three had broken through a fence and wandered off. When we got there, I understood why Bill looked so rattled. The three cows lay in a rough triangle pattern, maybe 20 feet apart from each other. They weren't torn up like you'd expect from predators. No guts scattered around, no chunks of meat missing. They just lay there, looking almost peaceful except for their eyes, wide open, staring at nothing. I knelt beside the first one, pulled on latex gloves, and started my examination. That's when I saw the marks. 2 small puncture wounds on the neck, precise and clean. The kind of wounds that almost looked surgical. Heck, the other 2 cows. Same thing. 2 puncture marks, always on the neck. "Bill, hand me that flashlight." I examined the wounds more closely. The edges were smooth, not ragged, like you'd get from teeth or claws. And the strangest thing, there was almost no blood. Not on the ground, not matted in the fur, nowhere. "What kind of animal does this?" Bill asked. I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know. I'd investigated hundreds of livestock kills. I knew what coyote attacks looked like, bear attacks, dog attacks. This wasn't any of those. I took photographs, collected samples, made notes. All the while, something was bothering me. The air felt wrong somehow, too quiet. It was dusk, prime time for birds to be settling in for the night, but I couldn't hear any. No crickets, no frogs down by the creek. Nothing. "You got any other strange activity recently?" I asked Bill. "Dogs acting weird, anything like that?" He nodded slowly. "My hounds won't come out of the barn after dark no more. And last week, I found a whole mess of dead chickens. Not eaten, just dead. Lined up in a row outside the coop like somebody arranged them that way." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Over the next week, I investigated 3 more incidents. Each one was the same. Livestock found drained of blood through precise puncture wounds, no tissue consumption, bodies arranged in patterns that felt deliberate. A farmer near Robbinsville lost 4 goats. Another near Stokoa lost 2 horses. The weird part? No predator was eating the meat. In nature, nothing goes to waste. Coyotes, bears, even buzzards, they'll consume everything they can. But these carcasses just lay there, untouched, until I arrived to document them. I sent blood samples to the state wildlife veterinarian, Dr. Susan Blackwood. When she called me back, I could hear the confusion in her voice. "Marcus, these results don't make sense." "What do you mean?" "The blood wasn't just drained. It was removed completely. I'm talking every drop. The heart, the major vessels, everything. G is empty. But there's no corresponding blood loss at the scene. It's like something drew it out through those puncture wounds, but that's not possible. Not with wounds that small. Could it be some kind of exotic pet? Something someone's keeping illegally? I've never seen bite patterns like this. The punctures are too precise, too consistent. And Marcus, there's something else. I found trace amounts of an enzyme in the tissue around the wounds. I can't identify it. It's not from any animal in our database." I thanked her and hung up. My hand was shaking. That night, I decided to stake out Bill Henderson's property. Whatever was doing this seemed to have a territory, and his farm sat right in the middle of it. I parked my truck in a hidden spot near the tree line, set up with my rifle, my spotlight, and a thermos of coffee. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. I could see my breath in the beam of my flashlight. The mountains got that deep silence they sometimes have at night, the kind where every small sound seems amplified. Around midnight, Bill's dogs started going crazy, not barking like they'd spotted a raccoon or deer. This was different. Howling, panicked, terrified sounds I'd never heard dogs make before. I grabbed my spotlight and swept it across the pasture. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, at the edge of the light's reach, I caught a glimpse of something moving through the trees. Fast. Too fast to be a bear or deer. 2 red lights appeared in the darkness. Eyes, I realized. Glowing red eyes, about 4 feet off the ground. My finger found the trigger of my rifle, but my hands were sweating inside my gloves. The eyes moved, tracking along the tree line with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. Not the dull reflection of an animal's eyes in a spotlight. These were bright, burning, aware. Then I heard the sound. It started as a low rumble, like a big cat's growl. But it shifted, rising in pitch until it became something like a scream, except it had words in it, or something close to words. Like someone trying to talk while screaming. Every instinct I had was telling me to run. The eyes moved closer. I could make out a shape now in the darkness beyond my light. Low to the ground, but moving on 2 legs, not 4. Muscular, covered in dark fur or skin. The way it moved was all wrong, too fluid, too fast, joints bending at angles that shouldn't be possible. I raised my rifle, centered the scope on those glowing eyes, and squeezed the trigger. The muzzle flash lit up the night. The crack of the gunshot echoed off the mountains. When my vision cleared from the flash, the thing was gone. Just like that. I swept my spotlight across the area, but there was nothing. No blood, no tracks, no sign anything had ever been there. Except Bill's dogs were still howling, and I could smell something in the air. Sulfur, mixed with a metallic scent like blood. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I found tracks. Not at the tree line where I'd seen the eyes, but in Bill's pasture, near where his cattle had died. The tracks were unlike anything I'd ever seen. They showed a bipedal gait, something walking on 2 legs, but the prints themselves had claw marks. Deep ones. Whatever made these tracks could jump 15 feet between impressions based on the spacing. I photographed everything, made castings of the best prints. Then I did something I'd never thought I'd do in my professional career. I called Joseph Standing Bear. Joseph was a Cherokee elder, one of the traditional knowledge keepers. We'd worked together a few times on cultural sensitivity training for park rangers, and I respected him, but I'd always kept his stories about spirits and guardians in the interesting folklore category of my mind. Now I wasn't so sure. We met at a diner in Robbinsville. Joseph was in his 70s, but he moved like a much younger man. When I showed him the photographs, the drained livestock, the strange track, was the evidence of something that shouldn't exist, he didn't look surprised. He looked sad. "You know what this is," I said. It wasn't a question. Joseph stirred his coffee slowly. "My grandfather told me about the NVDA Tsunsti, the blood drinker. He said it lived in the high caves, in the sacred places where our ancestors are buried. It's old, Marcus. Older than the mountains. Come on, Joseph. There has to be a rational explanation. You're the one who called me." His eyes met mine, and they were serious. "You know what you saw. Your education, your science. They're telling you it's impossible. But your gut, your blood, they know the truth." I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull out my evidence and my degrees and my 13 years of experience and prove him wrong. But I'd seen those red eyes. I'd heard that scream. "What does it want?" I asked quietly. "It feeds," Joseph said. "Not on flesh, but on blood. On the life force inside the blood. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. The blood drinker only awakens when the sacred places are disturbed, when respect is lost." My stomach dropped. "The artifact hunters." Joseph nodded. "Sheriff Morrison called me last month, said they'd caught some people digging in the burial caves up on Chiowa Bald. White men with metal detectors looking for Indian gold and pottery to sell on eBay. Did they arrest them? Couldn't make charges stick. The caves are on federal land, technically in your jurisdiction, but the evidence was circumstantial. They got away with it." "And that woke this thing up?" "Didn't wake it up," Joseph corrected. "Made it angry." I spent the next 3 days researching. I pulled old incident reports from the Forest Service archives, talked to longtime residents, dug through Cherokee oral histories that Joseph helped me access. The pattern was there if you knew how to look for it. Every 30 Antum, for 40 years going back over a century, there were reports of mysterious livestock deaths in the Nantahala high country. Always the same, blood drained, precise wounds, no predator feeding. And always, the incidents occurred after sacred sites were disturbed by grave robbers, developers, or careless tourists. In 1947, 3 artifact hunters disappeared in the Kiowa Bald area. Their camp was found intact, but the men were gone. Searchers reported finding strange tracks and smelling sulfur in the area. The case was never solved. In 1912, a logging operation started cutting timber near a known burial site. 5 workers died over the course of 2 weeks. The company doctor noted that all 5 had been drained of blood by an unknown agency. The logging company abandoned the site. This wasn't just an animal. It was something else. Something that had been protecting these mountains for a very long time. On October 23rd, everything changed. A local poacher named Tommy Watkins was found dead at his illegal deer stand about 3 miles into the national forest. A hiker spotted him and called it in. Sheriff Morrison asked me to come help with the scene since it was in my territory. Tommy sat in his tree stand, rifle across his lap, eyes wide open. He looked terrified. Not just scared, absolutely, fundamentally terrified. His face was locked in an expression of pure horror. No external injuries, the sheriff said. No gunshots, no stab wounds, nothing. Medical examiner says it looks like his heart just stopped. I climbed up to examine the body more closely. That's when I saw the marks on Tommy's neck. 2 small puncture wounds, just like the livestock. Sheriff, we need to get him down and covered up, now. Why? What'd you find? This wasn't a heart attack. This was murder. We got Tommy down and I examined him away from the other deputies. His skin was pale, almost translucent. His lips were blue, and when I checked his eyes, I saw tiny burst blood vessels, petechiae they're called, the kind you see in asphyxiation cases. But Tommy hadn't been strangled, country. Both were found alive, but unconscious, drained of most of their blood. They survived, barely, but they wouldn't talk about what happened. One just stared at the wall. The other started crying whenever anyone mentioned the forest. The local news picked up the story. Tourism dropped overnight. Hunting season was in full swing, and the forest should have been full of people. Instead, it was empty. The local economy was tanking. The park superintendent called me into his office. "Marcus, what the hell is going on up there?" "I'm working on it." "Work faster. State office is breathing down my neck. They want this solved yesterday." But how do you solve something that shouldn't exist? I met with Joseph and Sheriff Morrison at Joseph's house. We sat around his kitchen table, and for the first time in my career, I admitted I was out of my depth. "It's getting stronger," Joseph said. "Every time it feeds, it gains power. The old stories say it can move between the physical world and the spirit world. It can make itself invisible, move faster than any animal, climb straight up rock faces." "How do we stop it?" Morrison asked. "We don't stop it," Joseph said. "We appease it. We restore balance." "What does that mean?" I asked. "The burial caves were desecrated. Sacred objects were stolen. The blood drinker is the guardian of those places. It's doing what it was made to do, protect the ancestors. But it's gone too far. It's become corrupted by anger. So what do we do?" Joseph pulled out a leather bag. Inside were herbs, stones, things I didn't recognize. "We perform a purification ceremony. We restore the sanctity of the burial sites. And we make an offering." "What kind of offering?" Morrison asked. Joseph looked at me. "Blood. Cherokee blood. Freely given." My stomach dropped. "Me? You have the old blood. You're a ranger. You protect these mountains. The guardian Migam might accept you as an ally instead of an enemy. But Marcus, it's dangerous. If it decides to feed on you instead, I'll die." "Yes." I should have said no. I should have walked away, called in the FBI, let someone else handle it. But 2 people were dead. Others were traumatized. And this thing knew where I lived. It had made this personal. When do we do it? I asked. New moon, Joseph said. 3 days from now. That's when its power peaks. That's when we'll have our best chance. The 3 days before the new moon were the longest of my life. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those glowing red eyes in the darkness. I heard that almost human voice saying my name. During the day, I helped Joseph prepare for the ceremony. He taught me Cherokee prayers I'd never learned, showed me how to make offerings, explained the sacred geography of the mountain. At night, I lay awake in my truck with my rifle, waiting for an attack that never came. The blood drinker was waiting too, waiting for the new moon. On October 30th, just before midnight, the three of us, Joseph, Sheriff Morrison, and I, hiked into the Kiowa Bald area. We carried no flashlights. Joseph said the Guardian would see artificial light as disrespectful. We moved by moonlight, which wasn't much. The new moon was dark. The temperature had dropped into the 20s. Our breath came out in clouds. The forest was absolutely silent. No wind, no animals, nothing. Just our footsteps crunching through dead leaves. Joseph led us to a cave entrance I'd never seen before, hidden behind a rockfall. This is the main burial site, he said, where the artifact hunters dug, where the desecration happened. We squeezed through the opening. Inside, the cave opened up into a large chamber. My eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness. I could make out rock formations, and along the walls, carved symbols. Cherokee Rars, hiding from hundreds of years ago. In the center of the chamber, someone had dug a pit. The artifact hunters. Bones were scattered around. Not just bones, but pottery shards, beads, items that should have been left to rest with the dead. Set up the offerings, Joseph said quietly. We arranged tobacco, corn, sacred herbs in the 4 cardinal directions. Joseph began to chant in Cherokee, old words I didn't know. His voice echoed off the stone walls. That's when I felt it. A presence. Something massive and angry, pressing down on us like weight. The temperature dropped further. I could see my breath crystallizing in the air. Sheriff Morrison's hand went to his pistol. Something's here. Don't shoot, Joseph said, still chanting. Don't show aggression. The darkness at the back of the cave began to move. Not shadows, the darkness itself, flowing like liquid. It pooled together, rising, taking shape. The blood drinker emerged from the dark. It was smaller than I expected, maybe 4 feet tall, but it radiated power. Its body was covered in dark fur or skin that seemed to absorb light. The face was cat-like, but with human intelligence in its eyes. Those burning red eyes. Its mouth was full of needle-sharp teeth. The hands had retractable claws, easily 6 inches long. It moved wrong. Its joints bent at impossible angles. When it took a step, it seemed to flicker, like it wasn't quite solid. Joseph continued chanting, his voice steady, despite the terror I knew he must be feeling. The creature circled us slowly. It moved closer to Morrison, and I saw his finger tighten on his trigger. Don't, I whispered. The blood drinker's head snapped toward me. It moved fast, impossibly fast, and suddenly it was inches from my face. I could smell sulfur and blood. Its breath was hot against my skin. Cherokee blood, it said. That voice, like screaming and talking at once. Old blood. Why do you stand with them? The thieves. The desecrators. They didn't do this, I managed to say. We're here to fix it. To restore what was taken. The creature's eyes bore into mine. I felt a pressure in my head like it was trying to get inside my thoughts. I saw flashes, not my memories, but its memories. Centuries of guarding these mountains. Centuries of watching its people suffer and die and be driven from their lands. And recently men with metal detectors and shovels, laughing as they stuffed sacred objects into garbage bags. They took, the creature hissed. They always take. I feed now. I protect. By killing innocents? I said. Tommy Watkins was a poacher, yeah, but he didn't rob any graves. Those hikers didn't either. You're supposed to protect, not murder. The creature reared back, its claws extended fully. I thought it was going to rip my throat out, but Joseph stepped between us. "NVDA Tsunsdi," he said, using the Cherokee name. "Old Guardian, listen to me. I am of the people. I speak with the authority of the ancestors." The creature paused. Its red eyes shifted to Joseph. "You have forgotten your purpose," Joseph continued. "You were made to protect the sacred places, yes, to guard our ancestors, but not through slaughter, not through terror. You have become what you were meant to stop, a taker of life." "They stole," the creature insisted, but its voice was less certain now. "And we will return what was stolen," Joseph said. "We will restore the sanctity of this place. We will make sure no one disturbs it again. But you must stop the killing. You must remember what you are." "I am Guardian," it said slowly. "Yes, Guardian. Not hunter, not killer. Guardian." Joseph began a new chant, this one different from before. He took out the herbs and began burning them, letting the smoke fill the chamber. The creature watched, transfixed. "Marcus," Joseph said quietly, "your blood, the offering." I pulled out the knife Joseph had given me. My hand was shaking. I drew the blade across my palm, let the blood drip onto the stone floor of the cave. "Freely given," I said. "Cherokee blood, as a sign of respect, as a promise to protect these mountains and honor the sacred places." The creature moved toward the blood. It knelt, touched, the blood with one clawed finger. When it looked up at me, something had changed in its eyes. "Old blood," it whispered. "True blood." Joseph continued chanting. The smoke grew thicker. The creature began to change. The fur or skin rippled, and for a moment, I saw something else underneath. Something that looked almost human, but ancient, worn down by centuries. "We will restore this place," Joseph said. "We will bring back the stolen items. We will designate it as a protected site. No one will disturb it again. You have my word. You have his word." He gestured to me. The creature was shrinking, becoming less solid. "I am tired," it said. "So tired. So angry for so long." "Rest," Joseph said gently. "Let the anger go. Return to your true purpose. Protect, but do not destroy. Guard, but do not kill. This is the old way. The right way." The creature looked at me one last time. "You will keep the promise, Cherokee Ranger?" "I will," I said. "I swear it." Something like a sigh came from the creature. Then it began to dissolve, flowing back into the shadows like smoke. The red eyes were the last thing to disappear, fading like dying embers. The chamber was silent. We stayed in that cave until sunrise, completing Joseph's purification ceremony. We gathered up all the scattered bones and artifacts, treated them with respect, reinterred them properly. Sheriff Morrison took photographs of everything for his case file. The artifact hunters were arrested 3 days later. Turns out they'd been bragging about their finds online, posting pictures. The evidence was overwhelming. They agreed to return everything they'd stolen and face federal charges for grave robbing on public land. The official story was that Tommy Watkins and the hikers had been attacked by a rabid animal, probably a mountain lion. The livestock deaths were attributed to a pack of feral dogs that was later inated by wildlife officers. The Park Service was happy to close the cases and move on. But I know the truth. The burial caves were officially designated as restricted archaeological sites. I personally patrol them now, make sure no one goes near them. I've learned more about Cherokee culture and history than I ever did growing up. Joseph and I meet regularly. He's teaching me the old ways, the old stories. Sometimes on night patrol I catch a glimpse of red eyes in the darkness. But they don't feel threatening anymore. They feel like watching, guarding. The blood drinker is still there. It will always be there. But it's not angry anymore. It's doing what it was meant to do, protecting the sacred places, protecting the ancestors. As for me, I'm different now. I see the forest differently. I understand that there are older things in these mountains than just trees and rocks, things that remember, things that were here long before we came and will be here long after we're gone. I keep my promise. I protect the sacred sites, and in return, the Guardian lets me walk these mountains safely. But I'll tell you this, if you're ever hiking in the Nantahala High Country, near the Kiowa Bald area, respect the land. Don't take things that aren't yours. Don't disturb places that feel sacred, because the blood drinker is still out there, still watching, still guarding, and it remembers every desecration